Chapter 3702. So you won't be able to unlock it? Xiao Hua asked disappointedly. Of course I won't be able to unlock it. Gusu Churan retorted, I've said it clearly before, this inscription law chain is completely different from the one on the innate fire mother. This inscription law chain contains a trace of the immortal emperor's will, and it also contains the pressure of the immortal palace. Without a jade seal, it's impossible to unlock it. The surprise I'm talking about is, I might be able to tell from the inscriptions on the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal that it was carved by the Master of Law. I might be able to find which punishment hall it belongs to. With these clues, I might be able to help Fujiwen. Confucian cultivators have always been particular about order, and the Immortal Palace is the leader of order. This inscription law chain contains the order of Confucian cultivators. It's not something we Dao sect cultivators can unlock. Zhai Xingzi sighed. Fujiwen's expression didn't change. He took the inscription law prison crystal from Gusu Churan and said respectfully, Junior thanks to seniors. Junior is already prepared to be able to stay by my wife's side. Regardless of the method, Junior is satisfied. All right. Xiao Hua nodded. You must be happy to have such thoughts. There aren't many family members in this world who can stay by your side for the rest of your life. I don't know about others, but Zhai Xingzi and I will definitely be able to. Gusu Churan smiled at Zhai Xingzi with a happy expression. If Gusu Churan was so affectionate in front of Xiao Hua, Zhai Xingzi wouldn't feel anything, but in front of a junior like Fujiwen, Zhai Xingzi felt a bit awkward and coughed slightly. Who knew that Gusu Churan would pout and become even more aggressive as she hugged Zhai Xingzi's arm. Zhai Xingzi moved his arm but didn't dare to pull it out. At this moment, Gusu Churan didn't look like a level 5 elemental energy grandmaster anymore. Time passed very quickly. Seeing that it was almost night, Fujiwen carefully placed the wooden box containing the thunder amplification wood on the floor of the wooden house. He clasped his hands together and waited for the moment to arrive. Catcher! Suddenly, several thunderbolts appeared in front of everyone's eyes like horned dragons. Soon after, the thunderbolts struck the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal. However, before the thunderbolts could land, they were blocked by the wooden box. Shua shua sounds could be heard from the thunder amplification wood. It was as if there was sand moving inside. Soon after, some purple lightning in the wooden box entered the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal. Wang! The Heaven's Punishment prison crystal let out a rumbling sound in the lightning and floated up from the wooden box. The inscription chains began to float and overflow again. A kind of indescribable solemnity, a kind of orderly, irresistible and rebellious feeling was born from these chains and gradually spread throughout the entire wooden house. Not to mention Xiao Hua and the others who were standing solemnly, even the somewhat messy books began to move on their own without any wind, gradually moving on their own and becoming orderly. Order. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Rules. Enchantment. Since he was enlightened, Xiao Hua immediately closed his eyes. He didn't release his divine sense and only used the heavenly infusion technique. The pores all over his body opened wide as he carefully comprehended the power of the Immortal Palace's rhythmic chains. Xiao Hua's abnormality immediately attracted Zhai Xingzi's attention. Unfortunately, with Zhai Xingzi's late Yuanying stage cultivation, he still didn't understand the power of rules. Perhaps he somewhat understood, but he didn't sense anything from the order of the Confucian cultivators. This Daoist Master Xiao is a bit strange. Zhai Xingzi wanted to release his divine sense to see what Xiao Hua was doing. Unfortunately, just as his divine sense was released, it was immediately defeated by the inscription chains. At this moment, the wooden house was filled with the order of the Confucian cultivators. Daoist techniques simply couldn't be used. Catcher. A series of faint sounds like the blooming of winter plum blossoms appeared in everyone's hearts. The order that enveloped the entire wooden house was swept away. Several intertwined inscription chains broke from the middle. One by one, they turned into inscriptions and fell into the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal. Then, a cloud rushed out from the crystal. A beautiful woman wearing a flawless heavenly robe appeared from the cloud. Fu! When the woman appeared, she didn't look at anyone else. She flew into Fujiwen's arms like a little bird. Fu Jiwen was greatly embarrassed. He hurriedly opened his mouth and prepared to remind Yu Tan. But at this moment, an even more surprised voice sounded. Bayan. Why? Why is it you? Ah! The woman called Yu Tan, but actually called Bayan, was greatly shocked. She unbelievably stuck her little face out of Fu Jiwen's arms. When she saw Gusu Churan, she was similarly shocked. Gusu Chodi. You, however, just as Bayan was halfway through her words, she saw Zhai Xingzi again. The surprise on her face was even greater. Moreover, there was a kind of excitement and disappointment in her surprise. You. Why are you with Luo Kong again? Didn't you drink the forgotten love water? Sigh. I've been punished for nothing. Bayan had only appeared for a moment. Her two sentences were like two huge thunderbolts that immediately knocked everyone unconscious. Zhai Xingzi opened his mouth. He was really surprised. Luo Kong was his original name. Ever since he became a nascent soul, no one had called him that for many years. He had almost forgotten this name. And Gusu Chodi's face was even more excited. She shouted, That's right, Zhai Xingzi, you're called Luo Kong. I remember now. Your Dharma name Zhai Xingzi was given to you by me. You. Bayan was a little confused. She looked at Gusu Chodi and then at Zhai Xingzi. Her gaze also fell on Xiao Hua. However, at this moment, Xiao Hua still had his eyes closed as if he was an outsider. Bayan just glanced at him and then skipped over. Wife. What's going on? Fu Jiwen was really at a loss. He asked softly. Bayan broke free from her surprise. Her face was slightly red. She first looked at Fu Jiwen apologetically and said, Husband, before. I hid a lot from you. But now. No need to say more. I know that you've found someone to help me. My original name is Bayan. There's no need to talk about my background. The reason why I was imprisoned in the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal was because I violated the immortal law of the Immortal Palace. As for the immortal law, it's actually related to Sister Gusu. As for what it's related to, husband, it's better that you don't know. The more you know, the more it will affect your safety. Fu Jiwen took a deep breath and said with a smile, I'll listen to my wife's orders. If my wife doesn't want me to know, then I won't ask. Good. Bayan looked at Gusu Chodi with an indescribable expression. She asked, Sister Gusu, what's going on? Didn't you and Luo Kong both drink the forgotten love water? Why, did you recognize each other again? Hee. Gusu Chodi laughed. I naturally drank the forgotten love water and completely forgot about Xingzi. He also did the same. However, I was banished from the Immortal Palace to the Star-Lord Palace of the Yarutai Mountain. This time, Xingzi and I happened to meet during the Yarutai Mountain gathering held by the Star-Lord Palace. I really didn't expect. When I saw Xingzi, I felt very familiar with him. So, I took advantage of the collapse of the Yarutai Mountain's array and ran out. Who knew? Xingzi was the same as me. He also felt a rush of excitement. We even remembered the Broken Heart Mountain in our hearts. So, we came to the Broken Heart Mountain. Although we still don't know why we were forced to drink the forgotten love water, we've already guessed it. Speaking of this, Gusu Chodi glanced at Xiao Hua who was daydreaming and said, We happened to meet your husband's master and followed him here. Who knew that we would actually meet you? I couldn't find any news about you in the Immortal Palace. I thought you were out on business. When I came to the hidden Immortal Continent, I didn't know anything. Who knew that you were actually imprisoned in the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal? From what you said just now, could it be that you, being punished by Heaven's punishment has something to do with me? Nonsense. Bayan smiled bitterly. If it wasn't for me sneaking into the Immortal Palace with you, how could you have met Luo Kong? If it wasn't for me leaking information, how could you have escaped from the Immortal Palace in advance? Your master was furious. Not only were you captured and forced to drink the forgotten love water, I naturally had to be punished too. Of course your family can protect you. But what about me? Although that person from the Emperor Star Palace pleaded for mercy for me, but Heaven's face is hard to predict. In the end, I can't compare with you. Not only did you stay in the Immortal Palace to accept your punishment, You were also purposely arranged to go to the Star-Lord Palace. Isn't this just to let you meet Luo Kong? Why is my life so bitter? Hehe, what's so bitter about you? Gusu Chodi smiled. Although you were punished by heaven's punishment and lonely for thousands of years, didn't you still find your ideal husband? Look at the thunder amplifying wood. Your thunderbolt technique must have reached an extremely high level, right? Oh, besides, you come out every year to get some fresh air. Isn't it also because someone tampered with it? What do you know? Dao Cheng was helpless. You didn't go through the test of the heaven's punishment prison crystal. This isn't a place for people to stay. If it wasn't for the princess secretly giving it to me, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to stand it. Don't worry, don't worry. Gusu Chodi smiled. If I didn't know about you, I wouldn't have said anything. But since I know, I will definitely help you get out of this prison. Please don't. Dao Cheng heard this and turned pale with fright. Clearly, she was frightened by Gusu Chodi's recklessness. She hurriedly said, "You are already a criminal. Don't torture yourself. You only need to bring my news to that person from the Emperor Star Palace. I'm sure she was also kept in the dark about me falling into the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal. She's the only one who can help me now." Got it, got it. Gusu Chodi covered her mouth and laughed. It's not easy for you to come out. You should have a private conversation with your little husband. Us masters need to discuss this. Dao Cheng heard this and blushed. She glared fiercely at Gusu Chodi. Let's go, Zhenren Xiao. Gusu Chodi urged when she saw Xiao Hua not moving. Fujiwen, you take Dao Cheng to the cave. Xiao Hua's voice was a bit strange, as if he was speaking from his stomach. Zhai Xingzi and Qiu Xianzi should leave too. I have some things to comprehend. -13. Chapter 3703. Yes, Master. Fujiwen doesn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly bows and answers while pulling Dao Cheng. Dao Cheng stares at Xiao Hua for a moment and doesn't dare to speak loudly. Following Fujiwen out of the wooden house, she lowers her voice and asks, "Husband, when did you acknowledge a master? This master of yours is very strange. I just acknowledged him." Fujiwen says with a smile, "However, I met him a few years ago. This thunder amplification wood was given to me by my master. I told you earlier." "Oh, it's that Daoist cultivator you're especially grateful to?" Dao Cheng somewhat understands, "But at that time when you told me, I didn't think he was very powerful. But now he's very strange." Fujiwen is somewhat puzzled. "Yes, very powerful." Dao Cheng looks at the cave and her eyebrows are already filled with spring. Her eyes overflow with light as she says in a low voice, "Follow your master well. In the future, your cultivation will definitely surpass Luo Kong." It has to be said that girls side with outsiders. Just after meeting Gusu Chodi, Dao Cheng tosses aside her former good friend's feelings and starts to plan for Fujiwen. She even compares her husband with Gusu Chodi's husband. Impossible, right? Fujiwen's heart is also burning with anger. But he still can't help but be surprised. Zhai Xingzi is a late Yuanying stage senior. How can I be more powerful than him? Hehe, don't worry. Dao Cheng's small hand tightly grasps Fujiwen's hand. I may not be good at other things, but I'm absolutely accurate in judging people. I believe Gusu Chodi has already noticed the anomaly. As she speaks, Dao Cheng's body unconsciously trembles and becomes somewhat hot. Not to mention Fujiwen and Dao Cheng who are in the cave fusing their souls and bodies. Gusu Chodi also hastily pulls Zhai Xingzi and the two quietly float out of the wooden house. The two leave the wooden house and look at the night sky above with a face full of horror. Gusu Chodi transmits, This Xiao Hua, which Daoist cultivator is he? Do you know his background?" Even though Zhai Xingzi transmits, he doesn't dare to speak loudly. He lowers his voice just like Dao Cheng, "I really don't know. I only heard old man Huode mention him and belittle him to be worthless. However, a few juniors also told me that this Xiao Hua is close to Zhong Daoran and Zun Kong. In other words, because of Xiao Hua, the two of them, who were originally at odds with each other, unexpectedly joined forces. This is also the main reason why I didn't obtain anything in this Yaotai gathering." Looking at the wooden house that was already a little far away, Zhai Xingzi no longer dared to release his divine sense. Similarly, Gusu Chodi no longer dared to use her eye-clearing technique. Just a moment ago, the two of them sensed that something was wrong with Xiao Hua's situation. They couldn't help but use their divine sense and eye-clearing techniques. What they saw was absolutely shocking. One of them saw the inscribed chains and the other saw the majestic void. How could they dare to stay in the wooden house? Fujiwen is so lucky. Gusu Chodi very abruptly gnashed her teeth and said, "No, Xingzi, you have to become Xiao Hua's sworn friend." "Ah, why?" Zhai Xingzi was very surprised. He didn't understand why Gusu Chodi would suddenly say this. You don't know." Gusu Chodi thought of something and hurriedly shook her head. "You don't need to know the details. You just need to befriend Xiao Hua. There's no need." After all, Zhai Xingzi was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. Although he also understood that Xiao Hua was very powerful, he still couldn't react for a moment. It's related to the secrets of the Immortal Palace. I dare not say too much, and I don't really understand either. Gusu Chodi also secretly transmitted her voice. You only need to know that Xiao Hua is a Daoist cultivator and also has the cultivation method of Confucianism. It seems, he's not inferior to me at all. Use your brain to think, if he attracts the attention of the Immortal Palace in the future, that's right. Zhai Xingzi slightly narrowed his eyes. If the Immortal Palace doesn't eliminate him, then, he's a hero of a region. He might even be on par with that person. I should befriend him at this time. Xiao Hua's most powerful is not only this. Gusu Chodi analyzed again. You and the Immortal Palace don't know about his current cultivation. This kind of concealment method, who can compare to him? At this point, Gusu Chodi's eyes brightened again. She said in a low voice, Zhai Xingzi, if I recommend Daoist Xiao to the Immortal Palace, will I be able to escape punishment? Sure. Zhai Xingzi heard this and his face changed greatly. He hurriedly stopped her. Please don't. Xiao Hua claims to be a Daoist cultivator and just came out from Yaotai Mountain. Right now he's extremely conflicted with the Immortal Palace. If you mention this matter, it's fine if it succeeds. If it doesn't, it'll be harming Xiao Hua. Hihi, I'm just thinking. Gusu Chodi laughed. No matter what, he's our savior. I won't harm him. Then the two snuggled up to each other and looked at the starry sky. Sweet flowers bloomed and withered. As for Xiao Hua, when the aura of the engraved law chains was produced, the Immortal Palace's law locked the entire wooden house. This was a rare opportunity. Xiao Hua immediately retracted his aura and opened all the pores on his body. He tried his best to comprehend the influence of this law on space. Although Zhai Xingzi and the others could sense the terror of this law, they could only see the surface. And Xiao Hua practiced the blood drop paradise, so he was naturally sensitive to this law. Moreover, he had suffered this kind of hardship several times. He always wanted to experience it for himself. Now that the harmless aura of the law spread out, Xiao Hua immediately began to swim in this aura like a fish. When Xiao Hua's mind entered the aura, his entire body was like one of the engraved law chains. Along with the order of the engraved law chains, a solemn aura was released. What was special was that some obscure things that Xiao Hua had obtained from comprehending the heavenly Tao suddenly appeared in his memory. It pushed Xiao Hua's comprehension deeper and deeper. Xiao Hua's eyes were filled with veined patterns. Some of these veined patterns were curved, some were straight, some were extremely long and seemed to have no end. Some were extremely short and seemed to be invisible to the naked eye. The veined patterns rushed out of the entire space. They seemed to be disorderly and orderly. The veined patterns were like chains and also like blood droplets. They were constantly changing shape. At this moment, Xiao Hua's mind also turned into a veined pattern and changed along with the other veined patterns. However, Xiao Hua tried his best to follow the changes. Unfortunately, he couldn't keep up with the changes at all. He was always rejected by the veined patterns. Xiao Hua chased for a moment and understood. He was far from understanding this law. How could he merge with it? As a result, he simply ignored it and let the veined patterns formed by his mind drift with the waves. It was also during this casual movement that Xiao Hua's mind saw the faint fine lines on the veined patterns. These fine lines were more subtle than the veined patterns. These fine lines were like armor inscriptions and also like gold inscriptions. They were even more similar to green seal characters. However, when Xiao Hua's mind carefully examined them, the fine lines disappeared. Xiao Hua gained some understanding. He knew that his cultivation was insufficient at this moment. Now, the most important thing was to see these fine lines clearly. As a result, he focused his attention on these fine lines. When he saw a fine line appear, Xiao Hua immediately followed it. When the fine line disappeared, he tirelessly pounced on another fine line. It was as if he was fishing, trying one after another. After an unknown amount of time, Xiao Hua sensed that the number of fine lines he was seeing was increasing, and the fine lines were also becoming clearer. Seeing another fine line appear to his left, Xiao Hua's attention immediately pounced over like a hungry tiger. Coincidentally, just as Xiao Hua's attention shifted, another new fine line appeared midway. Xiao Hua was completely caught off guard, and his entire mind immediately crashed into the fine line. Boom! Xiao Hua only saw countless lights and shadows swaying in front of him. Some were fireballs flying, some were ghosts walking in the night, some were boundless waves, and some were brilliant stars. In an instant, Xiao Hua's mind seemed to have turned into thousands of pieces and disappeared into these lights and shadows. At the same time, in another instant, all of his mind crashed into a ripple and appeared under the same starry sky. Xiao Hua was greatly shocked, and he was extremely bewildered and astounded. Could it be that an enormous starry sky is hidden within every tiny fine line that can't be any smaller? Every seemingly infinite starry sky, the law is just a tiny, fine line? Just as he was thinking, the thousands of pieces of his mind turned into thousands of stars, each with different trajectories, each with different fluctuations, and flew towards Xiao Hua. Boom! There was another burst of sound that seemed to split heaven and earth. All of the pieces of his mind condensed together. Suddenly, Xiao Hua had a kind of understanding. The starry sky in front of him was so familiar. Wasn't it the starry sky of the heavenly Tao in his space? At the same time, Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and a mirror appeared in front of him. Wasn't the thing condensed from the thousands of pieces of his mind Xiao Hua? This. Jade Archive. Xiao Hua hurriedly looked around, but under his body, wasn't it his own space? It was just that this space had been baptized by the falling stone matrix at the Jade Pavilion conference. With the expansion of his divine sense and mind, it was now 10 times bigger than before. It was at least hundreds of thousands of li wide. Sigh. Jade Archive. Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. An inconceivable feeling rushed into his heart. How could a fine line of law in the wooden house near Heartbreak Mountain be the starry sky of his space below it? The biggest secret in his heart was actually blocked by a fine line of law. What is the connection between them? Is it the law? Is it the law? Is it the boundary? Or is it the heavenly Tao's? Xiao Hua? The more Jade Archive Xiao Hua thought, the more confused he became. He looked up at the starry sky of the heavenly Tao. That incomparably huge heavenly Tao's. Xiao Hua was also ethereal and boundless. Forget it, my realm is not enough, my cultivation is not enough. It's difficult to find the reason. Jade Archive Xiao Hua sighed, but then he smiled again. I'm afraid this time's comprehension will end here. However, peering into the mystery of the law is extremely useful for eyes cultivation. -13. Chapter 3704. With that thought, Jade Archive Xiao Hua exits the space. His mind returns to its original position and he opens his eyes. Seeing that the sky is bright, Xiao Hua's heart moves. He pinches his fingers and does some calculations. He shakes his head slightly and walks out of the wooden house. Ha ha! Daoist Xiao, you are indeed powerful. The moment Xiao Hua exits the wooden house, Zhai Xingzi immediately notices. He flies over from the top of the mountain and cups his hands. Just a mere 100 days of meditation actually allowed Daoist Xiao to advance so much. If I did not see it with my own eyes, I would not dare to believe it. You flatter me, you flatter me. Xiao Hua says with a smile. Even if I were to cultivate in seclusion for 100 days, I am afraid I would still not be able to catch up to Daoist Xiao's late nascent soul stage. I still have to continue working hard. Congratulations, Daoist Xiao. Gusu Chodi also flies over from afar. Following behind her is Fuji Wen. Gusu Chodi's face is also filled with shock as she speaks from afar. Congratulations, Master, for coming out of seclusion. Fuji Wen is overjoyed. He lands on the ground and bows. Same to you, same to you. Xiao Hua cups his hands towards Gusu Chodi again. Looking at Fuji Wen, he says with a smile, Master was actually in seclusion by accident and missed your good thing. Master is really embarrassed in his heart. Come, take out your heaven punishment prison crystal. Yes, Master. Fujiwen didn't know what was going on, so he respectfully took out the wooden box. Xiao Hua raised his hand, and the heaven's punishment prison crystal flew out of the wooden box. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at the somewhat familiar inscription law chains. He opened his mouth, and 3 green lights that looked similar, but were actually completely different, flew out. They instantly turned into hundreds of tiny sword hairs, and fell into the inscription law gaps on the chains. Gusu Chodi did not expect Xiao Hua to break the inscription law chains right after coming out of seclusion. Seeing the sword hairs enter, she hurriedly yells, Daoist Xiao, stop. It was a pity that Gusu Chodi's words were too late. The sword tip strangely landed in the gap between the engraving law. At this moment, the engraving law chain was overflowing. The sword tip abruptly pierced through and nailed the entire chain. Shua. Just like how the engraving law chain collapsed that night, hundreds of engraving laws began to flicker, catcher. A total of 9 different colored thunderbolts emerged from within the inscription rule, and then 9 dragon-shaped phantoms appeared from within the thunderbolts. The 9 dragons danced and condensed into an oval phantom, and a suffocating supreme aura immediately rushed out from the oval phantom, pushing everyone back by over 30 meters. Star Child, quick, quick, put me into your Chenkuan bag. Gusu Chodi didn't have the time to explain in detail, she hastily shouted. When Zhai Xingzi saw Gusu Chodi's panicked expression, he knew that something bad was going to happen. He flung his emperor robe and took out his Chenkuan bag, wanting to take Gusu Chodi into it. Unfortunately, Gusu Chodi's body only moved a few times, but she didn't fly up. Zhai Xingzi said anxiously, Qiu, your strength has surpassed mine. I can't use my Chenkuan pouch to keep you. I'll do it. When Xiao Hua saw this, although he didn't know why Gusu Chodi was panicking, he didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly waved his hand. Boom! The Kunlun mirror's light beam rushed out and landed on Gusu Chodi's body. Gusu Chodi thought for a moment, then withdrew her resistance, and her body disappeared along with the light beam. Clear sky mirror? Zhai Xingzi's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise, and he asked in surprise. Without waiting for Xiao Hua's reply, a loud rumbling sound of thunder filled the air. In an instant, the area within a radius of 1,000 miles was filled with red clouds. A kind of black clouds that suffocated everyone was like an invisible wave that drowned everyone in a moment. An enormous distorted light that could split the heaven and earth appeared in front of everyone amidst the sound of thunder. Which daring cultivator dares to touch the immortal palace's inscription rule? An ethereal voice that was sometimes high and sometimes low, sometimes far and sometimes close sounded in everyone's ears. This. Xiao Hua's face turned ashen, and his body trembled as if he was scared out of his wits. He bowed and said, I don't know, what is this? You don't know, yet you dare to touch it. Thunderclaps resounded, but the shocking thunder still couldn't cover up that voice. You Daoist cultivators are truly daring. Sir. Senior. Xiao Hua gathered his courage and bowed, saying, I thought, this was a strange treasure sealed by a Confucian cultivator, so, even if it's a strange treasure, with your cultivation level, it's impossible for you to break it. Unless you can use the power of heaven and earth or a Daoist forbidden formation, that voice said coldly. This thing isn't for you to touch. Quickly return it to its original place. Today, I'm the one on duty. Since you're inexperienced and don't know the importance of this thing, I won't take your lives. If you try to break it in vain and get discovered by other enforcers, you'll definitely be struck by 10,000 lightning bolts, and your souls won't be able to reincarnate. After the voice finished speaking, another series of thunderclaps wreaked havoc within 1,000 miles. Soon after, the light shadow disappeared, the lightning disappeared, and even the red clouds dissipated. What does this mean? Xiao Hua's brows furrowed as he looked at the scorching sun in the sky, as if he was thinking of something. Xiao Hua's expression changed as he pondered. Cough cough, Daoist Master Xiao. Zhai Xingzi was still inferior to Xiao Hua. When the light shadow appeared, his entire nascent soul was imprisoned, and he couldn't use the mana in his body at all. He couldn't sense the qi of heaven and earth around him at all. After the person left, Zhai Xingzi let out a long breath. He looked at Xiao Hua, who was standing quietly, and coughed twice. Can you let Qiu out first? Xiao Hua nodded slightly. He waved his hand, and the Kunlun mirror appeared in his hand. With a flash of light, Gusu Chodi appeared in front of Zhai Xingzi with a happy expression. Without waiting for Zhai Xingzi to speak, Gusu Chodi asked first, Daoist Master Xiao, is the Kunlun mirror in your hand? Yes. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. How strange. Gusu Chodi said curiously, the Immortal Palace spent 1,000,000 years searching for the Kunlun ruins, but they only found a small fragment of the Kunlun mirror in the buried Immortal Continent. There were no other traces of the other parts. This fragment has no use at all. That's why the Immortal Emperor left the fragment in the buried Immortal Continent. Who knew that you actually have an almost complete Kunlun mirror? It's really strange. Xiao Hua was shocked and forced a smile. Since Fairy Qiu knows, I hope you can keep this a secret for me. Of course. Gusu Chodi smiled. I still have something to ask of you. How would I dare to leak it? What is it? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. However, after a moment, Xiao Hua came back to his senses and smiled. Fairy, are you saying that you want to hide in the Kunlun ruins? I have no problem with that. I just don't know if Daoist Zhai Xingzi will be jealous. Jealous? Gusu Chodi was stunned. Then, she covered her mouth and laughed loudly as if she understood the story. She looked at the embarrassed Zhai Xingzi and said, Xingzi won't be jealous. Usually, I'll be outside with Xingzi and hide inside when something happens. Oh, if you're afraid that Xingzi will be jealous, why don't you lend the Kunlun mirror to my Xingzi? TSK. You wish. Xiao Hua pursed his lips and immediately put away the Kunlun mirror. Gusu Chodi was just joking. She looked around and said softly, the law enforcer came, right? He didn't make things difficult for you, right? No. Zhai Xingzi shook his head. I was so scared that I didn't dare to move. Only Daoist Xiao dealt with it. It's fine. Xiao Hua explained the matter. In the end, he said, the law enforcer said unless you have the ancient Dao sect's forbidden formation. It's quite strange. Could it be that he wants us to save Worry Tan from the heaven punishment prison crystal? Master. Fujiwen said apologetically, disciple's humble wife's name is Bai An. That Worry Tan is trying to hide her origin. Xiao Hua didn't find it strange. Gusu Chodi also smiled and said, also, I'm not called Gusu Churan, but Gusu Chodi. All the sinners of Star-Lord Palace have to change their last word to Ran when they enter Star-Lord Palace. Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and said with a bitter smile, Qiu Xianzi, I don't even know your name. Is that okay? Hee hee. Gusu Chodi smiled and said, let's not talk about names. Daoist Xiao's intuition is right. This law enforcer. Although I don't know who he is, he should be on good terms with the school of the Emperor Star. If I'm not wrong, he should be the one who showed mercy to Baian. School of the Emperor Star? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, where is that? This is a place of the Immortal Palace. Gusu Chodi shook her head and said, however, I don't dare to reveal the secrets of the Immortal Palace. Let Fujiwen tell you what happened that night. Yes. Fujiwen answered from the side and told Xiao Hua about what happened that night. Xiao Hua's heart was shaken as he listened. In just 2 hours, so many secrets had been revealed. It was really exciting. After Fujiwen finished, Xiao Hua looked at Gusu Chodi and asked with interest, so, Bayan was punished because of Qiu Xianzi. Could it be that Qiu Xianzi doesn't want Bayan to be freed? Of course I want to. Gusu Chodi smiled bitterly and said, but I'm just a small general of the Immortal Palace. I was lucky enough to be punished lightly because of my family's power. Didn't you see it too? Even someone as strong as the law enforcer doesn't dare to be too biased. How can I help Bayan to be freed? Then how can this heavenly punishment prison crystal be broken? How long will it take to get out of internal trouble? What did the law enforcer mean by that sentence? Xiao Hua asked step by step. Gusu Chodi's expression was calm as if she had already thought about it. She said slowly, good question. I've thought about it carefully these days. If Bayan is to be freed, there are only two ways. The first is when the heavenly punishment prison crystal's punishment ends. The Jade Seal and Law will return to the Immortal Palace and Bayan will naturally be freed. The second is to rely on external forces. This external force has to be stronger than the Jade Seal and Law of the Immortal Palace. At this point, Gusu Chodi looked at Xiao Hua again and said, I'm sure you already know how powerful the Jade Seal and Law are when you tried to break the seal just now. Indeed. Xiao Hua nodded. My current cultivation is not enough to break the seal. Yes. Moreover, anyone who activates the Jade Seal and Law of the Immortal Palace can summon the Law Enforcer. We were lucky this time. If it wasn't for the Law Enforcer next time, we would be in trouble. Gusu Chodi continued, however, just like what the Law Enforcer said, the heavenly punishment prison crystal was thrown on the hidden immortal continent. Other than human power, it might encounter other forces of heaven and earth and seal. If these forces can directly break the Jade Seal and Law chains inside the heavenly punishment prison crystal, then it belongs to the power of heaven. The Immortal Palace is known to punish on behalf of heaven. Since it can be broken with the power of heaven, then the punishment will be over. -13. Chapter 3705. Yes, that should be the case. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. If we encounter an apocalypse, won't we just throw the heavenly punishment prison crystal in? The problem is, if the heavenly punishment prison crystal couldn't withstand the calamity, how could she withstand it? She might die the moment she comes out, right? Gusu Chodi reminded. Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat as he thought of his own space. In that space, whether it was the Jade Archive Xiao Hua or the green-robed Xiao Hua, they had the power to destroy mountains and tsunamis. This power was enough to destroy the heavenly punishment prison crystal. However, when Xiao Hua thought of the fine lines on the inscription chains on the heaven's punishment prison crystal, his heart almost trembled. He didn't dare to imagine what kind of disaster it would be if the fine lines of the inscription chains passed through the starry sky of the space and rushed out of the space. Not to mention that his greatest secret would be exposed. Even those magic treasures and spiritual herbs of immeasurable value within the space would bring a calamity to him, right? While Xiao Hua was pondering, Zhai Xingzi said, Qiu, didn't you say, you're going to an ancient Daoist ruin in the next few days? Perhaps there'll be some opportunities there. Yes, that's right. Gusu Chodi's face lit up. If there's a powerful restriction array inside, it'll definitely be able to resist the Immortal Emperor's Jade Seal. Bayan will definitely be able to escape from there. Gusu Chodi's definitely left and definitely right made Fujiwen's face light up with joy. Daoist Zhai Xing, have you decided to follow me to that ancient restriction array? Xiao Hua returned to his senses and asked with a smile. Zhai Xingzi was already used to Xiao Hua's tone and asked back, when did I say I wasn't going? Not only Zhai Xingzi, but I also want to go. Gusu Chodi shouted eagerly. Master. Fujiwen's tone was somewhat pleading. Needless to say, he also wanted Xiao Hua to bring him along. Your cultivation is insufficient. If you go, it'll be dangerous. Xiao Hua denied. You should go to Black Wind Ridge first. You're spoiling your disciple too much. Zhai Xingzi smiled. You said that Xueping was only at Foundation Establishment. Fujiwen is stronger than Xueping, right? If Xueping can go, why can't Fujiwen? Xueping's life was important, but Fujiwen's life wasn't. Besides, if Fujiwen doesn't go, who's going to bring the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal? Xiao Hua frowned slightly. What Zhai Xingzi said wasn't wrong. The ancient forbidden formation was indeed dangerous, but it was also a fortuitous encounter. Such a rare experience was absolutely important to Fujiwen. Don't you have the Kunlun mirror? Gusu Chodi said with a smile, if things go south, you can just take Fujiwen into the Kunlun ruins. This Xiao will consider it again. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. Zhai Xingzi looks at Xiao Hua's old hen-like appearance and says with a smile, Zhenren Xiao, I'm afraid you don't have much time to think. Previously, you said that you would arrive at Jingju after a month or so. Now, half a year has almost passed and we still haven't moved. Only half an hour. This Xiao will consolidate my previous comprehension. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and then landed on the mountain peak. He sat down cross-legged and formed a seal with both hands. Immediately, the wind and clouds on the mountain peak changed and yuan qi of heaven and earth gathered. Gusu Chodi was surprised and asked, Xingzi, what is Zhenren Xiao doing? Zhai Xingzi could not see the seal in Xiao Hua's hand and shook his head slightly. I don't understand either, but didn't you say? Consolidate your realm. Who would believe that? Gusu Chodi snorted coldly. I realize that this Xiao Hua is very honest sometimes, but is also very cunning at other times. Didn't the Confucian cultivators always say that there are no perfect people? Such a person is reassuring, Zhai Xingzi said with a smile. Of course, Xiao Hua was not consolidating his comprehension. He had just comprehended the order, and he could not help but feel ambitious. He wanted to try the karma seal that he could not control previously. Looking at Xiao Hua sitting cross-legged and forming a seal with both hands, who knows how long he had been planning in his heart. As the yuan qi of heaven and earth gathered, light and shadow began to appear in front of Xiao Hua's eyes. Then, an incomparably strange power began to be born from the seal and madly rushed into Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua knew that this was the backlash of the seal, so he naturally did not dare to be careless. His body's imbuing body technique was activated, and those 13,200 small dots also madly absorbed the yuan qi of heaven and earth. In an instant, a huge storm was born with Xiao Hua as the starting point and gradually expanded. Shock appeared on Zhai Xingzi and Gusu Chodi's faces. They looked at each other and turned into rainbows. Before they flew away, the two of them did not forget to bring Fujiwen, who was at a loss, along with them. Behind the three of them, the wooden house that Fujiwen built was swept up into the sky like breaking dry weeds and rotten wood. The wooden planks were instantly torn into pieces. The storm grew extremely fast. Zhai Xingzi and the other two flew out 3,000 feet and stood in mid-air. The storm behind them had already enveloped several thousand feet. Zhai Xingzi released his divine perception and felt the chaotic yuan qi of heaven and earth in the surroundings. Just as he was about to send his divine perception into the storm, a sharp pain like a knife cut off a wisp of divine perception. Sigh. Zhai Xingzi's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly withdrew his divine perception and wanted to say something. It was also at this moment, wong, wong. A strange sound came from the center of the storm. No matter if it was Zhai Xingzi or Gusu Chodi, their Niwen palace was greatly shaken. A kind of dizziness appeared, and before they could activate their divine ability to resist, swoosh. The entire several thousand feet wide storm suddenly stopped. The time of stopping was extremely short, and in the blink of an eye, all of the storm abruptly shrunk back. A powerful suction force pulled the three of them into the storm. Gusu Chodi was a great grandmaster who was at the lower stage of the 5th grade of essence energy. When had she ever been in such a difficult situation? Her entire body immediately glowed as she tried her best to resist. However, just as her true chi was generated, the suction force suddenly reversed and turned into a pushing force. Boom! The storm actually collapsed from the inside out. Gusu Chodi was caught unprepared, and her figure flew very inelegantly into the sky. Sigh. The storm gradually calmed down. The mountain peak had already changed. Xiao Hua, who had already changed into a Daoist robe, flew out with a strange expression. Originally, he wanted to rush into the hand of Karma's spell with the remnants of the order that he had just comprehended. Unfortunately, his cultivation was still insufficient, and he still couldn't use this spell. However, Xiao Hua didn't come out empty-handed. Just as the spell failed, Xiao Hua was seized by a sudden impulse and realized that Fu Juwen and the others had followed him into the ancient forbidden array. It was a frightening but not dangerous ending. As for the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal, Xiao Hua didn't sense it at all. Daoist Xiao. Seeing such a huge formation, Zhai Xingzi called out fellow Daoist with a bit of embarrassment. Seeing Xiao Hua fly out safely, he asked loudly, "Are you injured?" "He, Daoist's comprehension is really not bad. You gained something in just a moment," Gusu Chodi said with a smile, "and you even destroyed Fu Juwen's wooden house while you were at it." He. Xiao Hua also said with a smile, "I'm fine. It's just that I was thinking of something and couldn't control my magic power. That's why I failed. Since the wooden house is already gone, that's a sign for Fu Juwen to follow me. This is the will of the heavens. Many thanks, Master." Hearing this, Fu Juwen was overjoyed. He bowed and said, "Let's go." Xiao Hua flicked his sleeves and helped Fu Juwen up. He looked into the distance and said, "I didn't expect that we would stay here for so long. I'm afraid that Xueping is already waiting anxiously in Jingju." Jingju? Zhai Xingzi looked at Xiao Hua. He couldn't help but laugh. He said with a low voice, "Daoist Xiao, the direction of Jingju is behind you." "Oh." Xiao Hua said with a smile, "I was just lamenting about the Buddhist sect of the single Liang country." That. Gusu Chodi covered her mouth and laughed. Without holding back, she pointed it out, "The single Liang country is to your left. Go, go, go." Xiao Hua flicked his sleeves, "I just want to see the sunset. Is that not enough? If I don't go now, when will I go?" Seeing that Xiao Hua was about to turn into a rainbow, Zhai Xingzi hurriedly called out, "Daoist Xiao, don't be anxious. I have a flying boat here." Xiao Hua helplessly glared at Zhai Xingzi, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" That. Zhai Xingzi laughed in his heart. He didn't show it on his face. "Daoist Xiao is impatient. I'm not as good as you. Hurry up." Xiao Hua waved his hand to hide his awkwardness. "There's an ancient forbidden formation waiting for us to enter." "Daoist Xiao, aren't you happy?" He. Zhai Xingzi took out the flying boat while laughing. "It's precisely because it's an ancient forbidden formation that we can't be anxious. Previously, when I explored dangerous places with Daoist Xiao, which time didn't we prepare for more than 10 years? Which time didn't we use up a lot of energy? Now, in Daoist Xiao's mouth, this ancient forbidden formation is as easy as playing house. My luck is good." Xiao Hua rubbed his nose. He inexplicably thought of Xin Xin and the ancient forbidden formation at the bottom of the Saint River. "Let's go. Let's see how Xueping and the rest are preparing." Zhai Xingzi smiled as he controlled the flying boat. "If they aren't prepared, I won't try my luck with Daoist Xiao." Xueping and the rest were naturally well prepared, especially Xueping. In order to enter the forbidden formation and break through his bottleneck, he had started preparing more than 10 years ago. However, as time passed, the more information Xueping received, the less confident he became. The forbidden formation in the wilderness of Jingju had long exceeded his ability. Later on, Xueping realized that he couldn't easily break through the formation by himself. Thus, he began to invite experts to help him. Back then, when Xueping met Xiao Hua and saw Xiao Hua's great strength, he immediately thought of the forbidden formation. Thus, he invited him. Just like Xueping's predicament, the cultivators Xueping invited naturally wanted to explore as well. However, after exploring for a while, all of them shrunk their necks back. They knew that with their strength, they would most likely die if they entered. Without powerful assistance, none of them dared to enter. However, what was Xueping's cultivation? How powerful could the cultivators he invited be? Moreover, these Daoist cultivators who knew the news kept it a secret and did not dare to say too much. Therefore, until today, everyone had been looking forward to it for half a year. When they saw the flying ship flying over from afar and two extraordinarily powerful divine senses swept over, their hearts were finally at ease. They all flew up into the air and waited respectfully. -13. Chapter 3706. Shui Ping and the others watched Xiao Hua and Zhai Xingzi disembark from the flying boat. Xiao Hua was just a newly famous nascent soul cultivator, but Zhai Xingzi's reputation was well known in the hidden immortal continent, especially when he won the last rare treasure in the Jade Pavilion gathering. His emperor's outfit was particularly eye-catching. As soon as he flew out of the flying boat, there were immediately cultivators who came to their senses and came forward to greet him with joy. Xiao Hua, on the other hand, had long been placed in second place by them. Xiao Hua didn't care about this. He bowed to the cultivators facing him, but in reality, he waved his hand at the cultivators who had been paying attention to Zhai Xingzi. Gusu Qiudi and Fu Jiwen were the last to disembark. Fu Jiwen's cultivation was on par with Shui Ping and the rest, while Gusu Qiudi concealed her cultivation. She appeared to be around the 3rd grade of essence force and was dressed in a daoist robe. Zhai Xingzi looked at her with concern from time to time, and the cultivators immediately understood. Although they weren't as respectful as Zhai Xingzi, they were more respectful than Xiao Hua. Shui Ping and the other cultivators were happy, but Zhai Xingzi wasn't. Looking at the 12 cultivators' crooked cultivation, he almost curled his lips. Normally, Zhai Xingzi would have reprimanded them, but seeing Xiao Hua's indifference, Zhai Xingzi couldn't say anything. After all, he was invited by Xiao Hua. "You've waited for a long time. Are there only these few cultivators?" Although Zhai Xingzi was dissatisfied, he still asked according to the discussion on the flying boat. "Senior, please no." Shui Ping's cultivation wasn't the highest, but he was the first to initiate and knew that Zhai Xingzi was invited by Xiao Hua. He hurriedly bowed and said, "There were originally 15 people, but when we discussed waiting, they felt that this trip was too dangerous and they didn't know Senior Xiao well, so they chose to withdraw. The remaining fellow Taoists are very confident in Senior Xiao. Now that Senior has joined this trip." "My ass." Zhai Xingzi reprimanded Shui Ping without holding back. He pointed at the dozen cultivators who were only at the 3rd grade of essence force and said, "What do you think this ancient forbidden formation is? Even I don't dare to recklessly enter it. With your cultivation, you're just going to die." "Yes, this junior understands." Shui Ping smiled apologetically, knowing that Zhai Xingzi was speaking the truth. He replied, "I was the one who found the clues to the ancient forbidden array in the beginning. I've already discussed it for a long time, and I feel that, if we don't enter, we'll feel indignant. However, if we enter, we don't have any confidence at all. Now that Senior Xiao and Senior Zhai Xing are here, I feel that this is a great opportunity. We juniors can't compare to Senior, and we have very few choices. Under the pressure of the Confucian cultivators, we juniors have no choice but to risk our lives." Hearing Shui Ping's pitiful words, the dozen or so cultivators' faces were also filled with unwillingness. Zhai Xingzi sighed and said, "When Daoist Master Xiao mentioned this to me, I had already thought about it. Your idea is indeed correct. You want to use this ancient forbidden formation to raise your cultivation base, especially to obtain some fortuitous encounters from within. However, there were many ways to break through bottlenecks. It was possible to do so without relying on restrictive arrays. According to what this old man knows, there are a few hidden danger zones near Jing province. If you are willing, this old man can tell you the locations and you can go there to search for opportunities." "That's right." Xiao Hua chimed in from the side, "If you feel that you won't be able to gain much from those dangerous places, this old man can give each of you a usable magic treasure. Even if you return empty-handed from those places, you can still use those dangerous places to refine magic treasures." This. Shui Ping was somewhat surprised, and he also felt some regret. When he met Xiao Hua in the Danliang state, Shui Ping was very assured of Xiao Hua because the state preceptor of the Danliang state was present. Although he didn't tell Xiao Hua all the information he had, he still flaunted some details to Xiao Hua. However, he didn't expect how Xiao Hua would deal with it. Would he not want them to enter the forbidden area? Seeing Shui Ping's expression, Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Of course, this is only this old man's consideration. The specific choice will be up to you. After all, this ancient forbidden array was found by you all with great difficulty. This old man and the others have no reason to stop you from entering. Phew. Ping let out a long sigh and turned to look at the other cultivators. This news was rather sudden, so the cultivators weren't prepared at all. Furthermore, this choice was extremely difficult. Ping thought for a moment, looked at the other cultivators' troubled expressions, and asked respectfully, "Seniors, this matter is of great importance. Would you allow us to discuss it further?" "It's fine." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Feel free to discuss it. It doesn't matter if it's 1 day or 10 days. It's fine as long as there's a result." "Thank you, Senior." Ping bowed and raised his hand. This junior didn't expect that Senior Xiao would be able to invite Senior Zhaixing, so the meditation room wasn't prepared enough. "This junior will get someone to clean it up." "All right, go ahead." Xiao Hua waved his hand. Actually, this old man didn't consider it thoroughly before. "On the way here, I heard fellow Daoist Zhaixing explain the dangers inside, so we made this decision at the last minute. Sorry for making things difficult for you." No, this is also Senior's consideration for us. This junior and the others understand very well. Ping hurriedly waved his hand. Facing Xiao Hua, who even his own state preceptor had to treat with respect, Ping really couldn't bear any complaints. Faced with the temptation of the restriction array, the choice was truly difficult. Ping and the others understood very well that this restriction array was naturally extremely dangerous. If they weren't careful, they would die, but the benefits were also great. Not to mention that traveling between life and death was very beneficial to one's temperament, Tao foundation, and so on. Even if they obtained a damaged cultivation technique or an ancient Dharma artifact from the ancient restriction array, it would immediately allow their cultivation to enter another realm. Now that the Tao cultivation techniques of the hidden immortal continent had already been annihilated, Dharma artifacts, Dharma treasures, and so on were ordinary and mediocre. Any item from the restriction array would cause a sensation if taken out. Ping and the others didn't dare to pin their hopes on a great opportunity like Xiao Hua and the others. They only needed a little from Xiao Hua and Zhaixing, and it would be enough for them to roam the hidden immortal continent freely. This was also the reason why they had always coveted the ancient restriction array even though they knew it was dangerous. Xiao Hua and Zhaixing didn't seem to be in a hurry. They each occupied a quiet room. Fujiwen waited in front of Xiao Hua's room while Gusu Chodi cultivated in Zhaixing's room. She actually seemed to have thrown the matter of Ping and the others to the back of her mind. After more than 3 days, Ping and the others finally came to a decision. It wasn't out of Zhaixing's expectations. 8 of Ping's cultivators chose to follow Xiao Hua and the others into the restriction array, while the other 5 chose to withdraw. Zhaixing and Xiao Hua didn't go back on their words. They gave each of them a Dharma artifact and jade eye. The 5 cultivators were filled with joy as they left together. Presumably, they were going to travel to another dangerous place. "All right, since you've chosen to enter the restriction array with me, then I'll have to make it clear." Zhaixing and Xiao Hua sat at the head of the cave abode that Ping and the others had temporarily opened up. Looking at the 8 cultivators standing before them, Zhaixing was the first to speak. "Daoist Master Xiao and I will do our best to guarantee your safety. However, if you encounter a place that even we can't protect ourselves, we won't have the time to fend for ourselves." "Yes, we understand," Ping and the others said respectfully. "We're already extremely grateful to be able to follow the 2 seniors into the restriction array and fulfill our wish." Also, Xiao Hua added, "If the restriction array is divided into a few sections, then everyone should act according to your abilities. If there's some opportunity, then hurry up and leave. Don't lose your lives over there." Yes, we understand," Ping and the others replied again. However, they were also unconvinced. After all, Fujiwen, who was behind Xiao Hua, seemed to be less than a 3rd-grade essence force cultivator. Since Fujiwen could enter, why couldn't they? After Zhaixingzi gave a few more instructions, Ping respectfully took out a few jade eyes from his bosom and handed them over. He said, "This is the information we have gathered over the past dozen years, regarding the Misty Mountain Maze Formation. Please take a look." Misty Mountain Maze Formation? Zhai Xing's face revealed a shocked expression. He waved his hand and took the jade eyes. He asked in a low voice, Xueping, are you sure this is the Misty Mountain Maze Formation? I seem to have heard that the Misty Mountain Maze Formation is at Yongzhou's Misty Mountain. All right, I'll let you know. Xueping's face revealed a trace of pride. He cupped his hands and said, to tell you the truth, we didn't know this was the famous Misty Mountain Maze Formation. We only thought it was an ordinary ruin. However, as we investigated further and searched for clues around the maze formation, we didn't dare to believe that the Misty Mountain Maze Formation, which was far away in Yongzhou, could be in Jingzhou. If it's really the Misty Mountain Maze Formation, then, it's no wonder that countless Daoist cultivators have been searching for this maze formation in Yongzhou's Misty Mountain all these years. It's obvious that it's impossible to find it. Zhai Xing sighed. Even back then, I went to Misty Mountain and returned empty-handed. Actually, it's also a coincidence. Xueping smiled apologetically. When we first met Senior Xiao, we weren't sure, so we didn't dare to mention it to you. Later on, we left Yuzhou, and received the help of a fellow Daoist named Dao Cheng. Only then did we confirm that this ruin is the Misty Mountain Maze Formation. Dao Cheng? Zhai Xing looked up at the 8 people before him and smiled. Why isn't he here? I'm afraid Dao Cheng isn't fated to meet him, a cultivator beside Xueping said. Before you two came, he felt that the ruin was too dangerous and left early. What a pity. Zhai Xing looked at the jade eyes in his hand and thought for a moment before handing it to Xiao Hua. Daoist Xiao, you should take a look first. There's no need to look at the details in the jade eyes for now. Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. Exalted Zun Kong and Zhong Daoran haven't come yet. When they're all here, we'll discuss it together. What? Xiao Hua's words were no different from a stone thrown into a pond. Xueping and the others were stunned again. Senior Xiao, you said that there are more seniors coming? -13. Chapter 3707. Xueping clearly hadn't heard of Zun Kong and Zhong Daoran's names. A cultivator beside him was overjoyed. Senior, are you Zun Kong from Ji Province and Zhong Daoran from Jing Province? Of course, isn't this Jing Province? Since I'm here, how could I not inform him? Xiao Hua smiled. Great. The cultivator praised. Junior is a cultivator from Jing Province and has long heard of Senior Daoran's reputation. Unfortunately, I've never had the chance to meet you. Even, when fellow Daoist Xue mentioned the ancient forbidden formation, Junior had thought of asking Senior Daoran to take action. However, Junior's status and cultivation were truly low and I didn't want more people to know about this matter. That's why I kept delaying it. If Senior Daoran were to join us, we would have a greater chance of success. I hope so. Xiao Hua looked at Zhai Xingzi and smiled. Finding Zun Kong Shangren and Zhong Daoran for help was Zhai Xingzi's idea. Xiao Hua naturally didn't know that it was because Gusu Chodi saw that Zun Kong Shangren and Zhong Daoran had a very good relationship with him at the Jade Pavilion conference. That was why she encouraged Zhai Xingzi to befriend Zhong Daoran and Zun Kong Shangren. He only felt that since Zhai Xingzi, Zhong Daoran, and Zun Kong Shangren were all late Yuanying stage cultivators with good temperaments, if they worked together, whether it was this ancient forbidden area or their future cultivation, it would be beneficial. Therefore, after thinking about it, he agreed. Xiao Hua's communication methods naturally couldn't compare to Zhai Xingzi's. Xiao Hua only gave the communication talisman to Zhai Xingzi and had him use an unknown magic tool to send it out. He didn't care about anything else and took the opportunity to find Xueping on the flying boat. Xueping took advantage of the gap between the cultivators' words and discussed with the other cultivators in a low voice. He immediately found out that the 2 cultivators who didn't come were also late nascent soul cultivators. His face lit up with joy and he was so happy that he couldn't stop smiling. Not only did he feel that he was lucky to have met Xiao Hua that day, he also felt that it was fortunate that he didn't choose to leave a few days ago. Many thanks, Senior Xiao. Xueping sincerely thanked Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua pointed at Zhai Xingzi and said, this idea came from fellow Daoist Zhai Xing. You should thank him. While Xueping and the others were complimenting Zhai Xingzi, Xiao Hua gave Fu Jiwen a look. Fu Jiwen was slightly stunned at first, but he understood in an instant. After Xueping and the others had thanked Zhai Xingzi, he said, "Fellow Xue, I was born in Yu Province, which is quite far from Yong Province and Jing Province. I've never heard of this misty mountain maze. If you have the time, can you tell me about it?" Xueping already knew that Fu Jiwen was Xiao Hua's disciple. Although Fu Jiwen and Xiao Hua were not master and disciple in name, they were master and disciple in reality. In the future, Fu Jiwen's cultivation would definitely be above Xueping's. Therefore, Xueping did not dare to slight Fu Jiwen. He glanced at Zhai Xingzi and Xiao Hua and said with a smile, "Since fellow Fu doesn't know, and senior Xiao and senior Zhai Xing are also free, then I'll explain it to you. All right, all of you, sit down." Xiao Hua smiled and took out a small Chenkuan pouch from his bosom and handed it to Fu Jiwen. "Since you asked Xueping to explain, you should at least show some appreciation. This is a spirit fruit that this old man has been waiting for a while. Share it with them." "Yes, Senior Xiao." Fu Jiwen did not address Xiao Hua as master in front of so many cultivators. After receiving the small Chenkuan pouch, he took out some spirit fruits and spirit wine and gave them to Xueping and the other cultivators. Everyone sat down and tasted the spirit fruits and spirit wine while listening to Xueping's detailed explanation. Inside the cave, most people were tasting the spirit wine with relish, but Xiao Hua was listening to Xueping's explanation with relish. Xueping had spent more than 10 years gathering information about the Misty Mountain Maze formation, so he naturally knew the records in his jade eyes. At this moment, he was extremely fluent in describing everything, no matter how big or small. Xiao Hua nodded repeatedly as he listened. Not long after, Xiao Hua already understood that this Misty Mountain Maze formation indeed had some background. It was indeed worthy of being a legendary ancient forbidden formation. This Misty Mountain Maze formation was different from the Sage's Palace under the river. It was not a place where relics were enshrined, nor was it a place where demonic artifacts were suppressed. Instead, it was a cave abode used by a famous ancient Daoist cultivator, Kang Lungzi, for a long time before he underwent tribulation. Of course, Kang Lungzi wasn't famous because he was a cultivator who went through tribulation, nor was it because he had ascended. Instead, it was because of the ink cloud pupil that appeared on the hidden immortal continent. Many of the ancient records recorded a heaven-shaking battle. This battle was a life-and-death battle between Kang Lungzi and 1,000 demons' sacred realm demon ancestor. Kang Lungzi was known as the most promising Daoist disciple to undergo tribulation and enter the Mahayana realm at that time, and the 1,000 demons' sacred realm demon ancestor was also known as the most promising one to become a great sage. There seemed to be no winner or loser in this life-and-death battle between the two. At least in the known ink cloud pupil, there was no record of victory or defeat. All the ink cloud pupil only described the ferocity of the battle between the man and the demon, the vastness of their magical powers, and the living beings within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers that were affected. It was not an exaggeration to say that the sky was dark and the earth was falling apart. After the battle that lasted for more than 10 days, everything returned to normal. Neither the man nor the demon died. The demon seemed to have been defeated and left. Kang Lungzi did not say anything and immediately entered the Misty Mountain Maze to cultivate in seclusion. When he came out of seclusion thousands of years later, Kang Lungzi welcomed his heavenly tribulation. Kang Lungzi easily passed the heavenly tribulation and reached the Mahayana realm. Then he sealed the Misty Mountain Maze and floated away, disappearing without a trace. As for whether he ascended or became an immortal, no one knew. According to the ink cloud pupil's records and the inference of others, the Misty Mountain Maze not only contained the magic treasures that Kang Lungzi collected before his tribulation, but also all kinds of rare Daoist spirit pill. Of course, the most important thing was Kang Lungzi's orthodoxy, as well as his comprehension after the battle and what he obtained before his tribulation. However, the Kang Lungzi's cave abode was very rich and the restrictive spells were very powerful. Before Kang Lungzi went into seclusion, he sealed the cave abode with a Misty Mountain Maze to prevent others from disturbing him and the invasion of the 1,000 demons' sacred realm. It was very difficult to enter without great magic power and great magic power. There were even some strange things recorded in the ink cloud pupils' records. When Kang Langzi was in seclusion, the Misty Mountain Maze was activated 3 times. The first time, there was a strange phenomenon of thousands of Buddhas chanting together. In the space of tens of thousands of miles, there was a rampant image of the heavenly dragon and many Buddhas. However, the chanting lasted for several months and finally disappeared. The second time, there was a strange phenomenon of rosy clouds covering the sky. The Misty Mountain Maze was covered by colorful clouds for thousands of miles. All the cultivators' divine thoughts, divine senses, and eye-clearing spells could not see through it. Moreover, outside the rosy clouds, there was an endless amount of noble spirit that was more turbulent than the tide. The chanting of the students was not inferior to the chanting of the Sanskrit. The strange phenomenon lasted for a whole year. Unfortunately, it still disappeared mysteriously. Although the Misty Mountain Maze was damaged, it was not broken. There was another time that was the most dangerous. It was said that the mountain shook and the earth shook. Thousands of demons attacked the Misty Mountain Maze crazily. Even the stars from outer space came to help. The landscape of thousands of miles around the Misty Mountain was changed. However, in the end, the strange phenomenon was the same as the previous 2 times. It ended with blood rushing to the sky. Although the Misty Mountain Maze was almost destroyed, it lasted until the end. Although there was no record of the cultivators who came to the Misty Mountain Maze 3 times, everyone could see the power of the Misty Mountain Maze. After that, there was no record of a famous battle. Of course, the reason why the Misty Mountain Maze had been preserved from ancient times until now was not only related to the power of the Misty Mountain Maze, but also to the illusory nature of the maze. This was because not only did the Kang Langzi enter and exit from different locations, but the locations of the 3 strange phenomena were also different. It seemed that other than the Kang Langzi, no one knew where the Misty Mountain Maze was. At first, Xiao Hua was listening with interest. However, as he listened, the expression on his face changed. In the end, there was a strange look in his eyes as he looked at Xueping in disbelief. This was because, in his opinion, the secret land that Xueping could find could not be that great. At most, it was a place for training. Previously, he needed to rely on this secret land to shatter the earth crystal yarrow milk in his body. However, now, he no longer needed to do so. However, since he had promised Xueping, at most, he would bring Xueping in for training and ensure Xueping's safety. Even in the country of Danliang, Xiao Hua did not mind when Xueping bragged that he had accidentally found the ancient forbidden formation. After all, Xiao Hua had seen the ancient forbidden formation before. However, at that time, he was already a little vigilant. That was why he brought Zhai Xingzi and Gusu Qiudi over. He even specially used the Karma hand on Fu Jiwen. However, he never expected that the ancient forbidden formation would have such a great background. It was so great that it made him fearful. That was the cave abode of a great cultivator who was close to the tribulation stage. How could it be broken by a mere nascent soul stage cultivator like him? In particular, how could such an important maze be preserved until now? And it just had to be found by a small cultivator like Xueping who had just reached the 3rd level of cultivation? This was truly inconceivable. However, when Xiao Hua shifted his gaze from Xueping to Zhai Xingzi, he could not help but be stunned. This was because Zhai Xingzi's face was no longer as surprised as before. His usually calm face was actually filled with eagerness. This was really rare for the extremely dignified Zhai Xingzi. Even Gusu Qiudi's eyes flashed with fanaticism. It was as if the danger of the Misty Mountain Maze did not attract their attention. That Xiao Hua could not help but speak. He frowned and said to Zhai Xingzi, "Fellow Daoist Zhai Xingzi, don't you think that our strength is not enough to explore the cave abode of this tribulation stage senior?" Xueping naturally stopped when Xiao Hua spoke. He looked at Xiao Hua in confusion. As for Zhai Xingzi, he raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, "Why do you say that? Our strength is around the lower 5th level of cultivation. Is it not enough to deal with this ancient maze?" "This Xiao feels that it's beyond my ability," Xiao Hua replied earnestly. -13. Chapter 3708. I don't think so. Zhai Xingzi laughed. Xueping has already explained it clearly. Moreover, to be honest, I have some understanding of this misty mountain maze formation. Although Senior Kang Langzi was a cultivator who went through the tribulation, he went through the tribulation after coming out of the misty mountain immortal abode. In other words, when he set up the maze formation in the Cloud Mountain immortal abode, he was merely a 7th grade essence force cultivator. Even though the maze formation was powerful and could withstand an 8th grade essence force cultivator, Daoist master, don't forget, that was during the ancient era, millions and millions of years before our Dao sect's legacy was wiped out. Time has always been the best method to break any formation. I don't think that after so many years of erosion, this misty mountain maze formation can still resist against an 8th grade essence force. Moreover, based on my previous experience of entering ancient formations, it is already not bad for this misty mountain maze formation to be able to resist against a 6th grade essence force. It might even be able to resist against an upper 5th grade essence force. Daoist master, have you entered an ancient formation before? Xiao Hua asked thoughtfully. Yes. Zhai Xingzi nodded. My cultivation technique actually came from the ancient times. According to what I know, that formation was more than 1,000,000 years later than the Misty Mountain Maze formation. If I could break that formation with my cultivation back then, this Misty Mountain Maze formation shouldn't be a problem. I see. Xiao Hua was still hesitant. Zhai Xingzi looked at Gusu Chodi beside him and said, actually, I want to enter Senior Kang Langzi's abode not only to break through my current bottleneck, but also to find the answer to a riddle. Riddle? Xiao Hua frowned slightly. But then he came to a realization and smiled. The Misty Mountain Maze formation is merely the abode that Senior Kang Langzi used to cultivate before his tribulation. I'm afraid it's not realistic for Daoist Zhai Xing to find the secret of ascension inside. No. Zhai Xingzi shook his head solemnly and said word by word, I didn't enter the Misty Mountain Maze formation to find the trace of Senior Kang Langzi's ascension, but to find the mystery of our Daoist abode's destruction. Ah! It wasn't just Xiao Hua. Even Fujiwen and the others, as well as Gusu Chodi, turned pale with fright. They truly didn't expect Zhai Xingzi to have such thoughts. Zhai Xingzi stood up and walked step by step to the entrance of the cave. With both hands clasped behind his back, he looked at the clear sky outside the cave, took a deep breath and said, Our Dao League cultivators, regardless of whether they are of the 1st tier or the 4th tier, are all more profound and powerful than Confucian cultivators of the same tier. Daoist cultivators breathe in the chi of heaven and earth, communicate with heaven and earth, and draw upon the power of heaven and earth. Meanwhile, Confucian cultivators absorb the chi of righteousness, collude with the humanities, and draw upon the accumulated power. Compared to them, Daoist cultivators are much stronger. However, on this hidden immortal continent, our Dao cultivators are firmly suppressed by Confucian cultivators. The entire continent is the world of Confucian cultivators. Although there are traces of our Dao sect in the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm and Paradise, our Dao sect is only a supporting role. This old man has cultivated for several thousand years. I don't dare to say anything else, but anyone who is of the same tier as this old man is no match for this old man, no matter if it is Confucian cultivators, Buddhist disciples, or demon. Therefore, this old man feels that even if Confucian cultivators and Buddhist cultivators join hands, they may not be able to completely wipe out our Dao sect's orthodoxy. This old man wants to find the answer to this riddle from the ancient ruins. Hiss. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Zhai Xingzi in a daze. He also didn't expect that this nascent soul cultivator of the hidden immortal continent who was suppressed by Confucian cultivators to this extent still didn't eat his tough bones, still didn't bend his straight waist, and actually wanted to explore the truth buried deep under the dust of time like him, a cultivator from the Dawn Rain continent. Good. This concubine supports you. Gusu Chodi slapped the table and stood up, clapping her hands and saying, everyone in the world, regardless of their background, is fair. Be it Confucian cultivators or Daoist cultivators, everyone has the right to cultivate. Xiao Hua smiled. looking at this female general of the immortal palace who was at the lower fifth level of elemental energy, and then looking at the Daoist nascent soul cultivator who was overlooking the world outside the cave. This is a true match made in heaven. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and also said, fellow Daoist Zhai Xingzi's idea is good, but Senior Kang Lang Zi's cave existed before our Dao sect declined. There may not be any clues inside. In particular, this Xiao has read all the ancient records of the hidden immortal continent. The records of our Dao sect's decline are very clear. The process of the immortal and Buddhist cultivators joining hands to destroy the Dao, and there are also very few ancient records. It can be said that it's as if it's been washed by water, abnormally clean. Even if we take the risk and enter, it's unlikely that we'll find anything. Burning scriptures and destroying the Dao. Zhai Xingzi smiled coldly and said, this is a common method used by Confucian cultivators. Not only did Confucian cultivators destroy ancient records, they even erased the cultivators' memories. Who would know what happened millions of years ago? Not to mention Confucian cultivators, even Buddhist cultivators and demons have this method. At this point, Zhai Xingzi looked at Xiao Hua and said, this old man also didn't expect that Daoist Xiao would have the same intention as this old man. I wonder if Daoist Xiao has found anything? Temporarily not. Xiao Hua said with a somewhat concealed smile. Zhai Xingzi didn't ask any more questions and continued, of course, even if we can't find the answer to our Dao sect's destruction in Senior Kang Lang Zi's cave, if we can find his Dao sect's orthodoxy, it can be considered as finding the complete inheritance of our Dao sect. Our trip will not be in vain. Ha ha. Xiao Hua laughed loudly and said, fellow Daoist Zhai Xing, this Xiao was right to bring you here. Could it be that you also found the flaw in our Dao sect's cultivation method? Ah! Could it be that Daoist Xiao? Zhai Xingzi was somewhat surprised. He turned his head to look at Xiao Hua and said very thought-provoking, it seems that there are indeed many people with intentions in this world. Since we're all people with intentions, then we should be able to cooperate. Xiao Hua's words seemed to have a double meaning. Actually, Gusu Chodi opened her mouth and seemed to want to say something. However, she only said 2 words and didn't say anything else. Regarding the Dao sect, Xiao Hua and Zhai Xingzi could only stop at this point. Then, under Fu Juwen's urging, Xueping roughly recounted the process of him finding the Misty Mountain Maze formation. Xiao Hua carefully listened and analyzed at the side, but it was obvious that Xueping's experience was impeccable. Over 10 years ago, Xueping accidentally stepped on dog shit, allowing him to be extremely lucky and find a trace of the Misty Mountain Maze formation. Then, over 10 years of painstaking investigation proved an old saying, there's nothing in this world that's difficult for those who are willing. This ancient forbidden formation that even nascent soul cultivators couldn't find after racking their brains was actually found by Xueping and other cultivators of the 2nd and 3rd grade. Forget it. After Xueping finished speaking, Xiao Hua waved his hand and looked at the extremely lucky Xueping, whose face was flushed red, and said, let's talk about what preparations you've made. Don't just prepare to break the formation empty-handed. Xueping's face was slightly red, and he smiled apologetically, of course we've made some preparations. However, our strength is limited, and our knowledge is shallow. Especially after we found out that this was the Misty Mountain Maze formation, we realized that our preparations were indeed insufficient. However, the preparations we've made over these years have been recorded in the Jade Eyes. Senior will understand after taking a look. Zhai Xingzi smiled and said, no matter, I've made some preparations myself. Moreover, the message talismans I sent to Master Zun Kong and Zhong Daoran also mentioned that they should have made some preparations. However, at this point, Zhai Xingzi smiled mysteriously and said, of course, I didn't know that this was the Misty Mountain Maze formation before coming here. Now that I know, there's still one more thing to prepare. Daoist Xiao, I'll have to trouble you to hold the fort here and wait for the 2 of you to arrive. I still have to make a trip out with Chou. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and nodded, go ahead. Since we're going to enter the abode of an ancient tribulation transcending senior, no amount of caution is excessive. We have to consider all possibilities. I'm inexperienced in this aspect, so I'll have to trouble you for everything. After that, Zhai Xingzi and Gusu Chodi turned into rainbows and flew away. They didn't say when they would return. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and wanted to contact Ao Zhantian and Shui Mingzi, who were also late nascent soul cultivators. However, he only thought about it for a moment before tossing it aside. After all, there was a huge difference between making friends with sincerity and being forced to swear loyalty. If the two of them had any ulterior motives in the ancient maze formation, it wouldn't be good for either of them. After Zhai Xingzi flew away, Xiao Hua stayed in the quiet room and cultivated. Fu Jiwen finally had a great teacher and wanted to ask Xiao Hua more. However, when he saw how hardworking Xiao Hua was, he felt a little embarrassed. Fortunately, Xiao Hua saw some clues and told Fu Jiwen that if he had any questions, he could ask Fu Jiwen at any time. There was no need to be afraid of anything. Furthermore, Xiao Hua spent 3 days examining Fu Jiwen's cultivation realm. Finally, to Fu Jiwen's astonishment, Xiao Hua gave him the cultivation method for the heavenly tomes and array talismans in his body. Although it wasn't a complete system, it was enough to shock Fu Jiwen. This cultivation method that transcended Confucianism and Taoism allowed him to see his future. It was just as Bian had said. As long as he cultivated according to Xiao Hua's instructions, his future realm would be limitless. Fu Jiwen was impressed by Xiao Hua's strength, but he couldn't help but admire his wife's foresight. What a pity. Even so, Xiao Hua still sighed. Although I have the art of array formations, I'm still lacking in simple and basic array formations. When I have the time in the future, I'll create some for you to study. Yes, thank you, Master. After Fu Jiwen thanked him, he began to cultivate. Moreover, he followed Xiao Hua's instructions and immediately asked for advice whenever he encountered a problem. He didn't dare to slack off. While Xue Ping and the others were envious of Fu Jiwen, they also discussed with each other. When they found out how Xue Ping befriended Xiao Hua, they all gathered their courage and came to ask for advice. Xiao Hua didn't dislike it. However, when he saw that they all wanted to come and ask for advice, he simply let them come along. As long as one of them had a problem, he would let everyone come and listen. This made everyone ecstatic. During this time, there were quite a few people who revealed that they wanted to become Xiao Hua's disciple. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua only smiled and didn't say anything. These people's aptitudes were all ordinary. It seemed like they weren't fated to be Xiao Hua's disciples. -13. Chapter 3709. Zhai Xingzi had been gone for several months and had not returned. This was within Xiao Hua's expectations. After all, these two people had made a last-minute decision. Whether it was searching for a person or an item, it was not that simple. However, Zunkong Shangren and Zhong Daoran, whom Xiao Hua had sent a message to, had not come either, which made Xiao Hua somewhat surprised. Zunkong Shangren was not in Jingju, so it might be a bit of a journey. However, Zhong Daoran was in Jingju. With his flying speed, it was impossible for him to not appear for so long. Moreover, Xiao Hua calculated that there was still some time before the auction that Zhong Daoran was hosting. Zhong Daoran would not delay the trip to the Forbidden Formation for the auction. Of course, when he thought of this, Xiao Hua's heart thumped again. He had an ominous premonition. He was not afraid that the two of them would have any disloyalty. After all, they had gone through the trials of the Sun, Moon, and Star formations of the Jade Pavilion Conference. Xiao Hua could still trust their characters. What Xiao Hua was afraid of was that the news of Star-Lord Hall's Lord Kong Hongwu being killed by him would be leaked without him knowing. Star-Lord Hall's master being killed, this was definitely a matter of Star-Lord Hall turning the sky upside down. Moreover, Xiao Hua also knew, this kind of matter would definitely be reported to the Immortal Palace. However, Xiao Hua had been thinking for a long time and did not feel that he would give himself away. In particular, he had appeared in the Scorching Sun formation with serious injuries. How could he have the ability to kill a Confucian Great Grandmaster of the upper 5th grade of elemental energy? The most dangerous ones were the few nascent soul cultivators who watched him kill Jing Mubai. However, this was the most dangerous and also the safest evidence. Because he could kill Jing Mubai completely by scheming. The strength he showed was just at the lower 5th grade of elemental energy. There was still a big gap from the upper 5th grade of elemental energy. It was impossible for him to kill Kong Hongwu. Of course, there were many nascent soul cultivators who died in the sun, moon, and star formation. Xiao Hua did not know how many of them could survive, but in any case, Xiao Hua felt that he was safe. As the saying goes, what you fear will happen. Just when Xiao Hua carefully sorted out again and did not feel that there were any flaws and was preparing to meditate, Zhong Daoran and Zun Kong Shengren came with a dozen disciples with a somewhat gloomy face. Naturally, Xiao Hua could not reveal that he was guilty. With a smile on his face, he greeted them and said, "Fellow Taoists, why did you come so late? I thought that the two of you didn't take my message to heart." No. Zhong Daoran forced a smile and said, "Back at Yaotai Mountain, this old man had already said that fellow Daoist Xiao's matter was my matter. Now that fellow Daoist sent a message, how could this old man not come? But suddenly, something happened. Also, didn't you say that you sent a message to Brother Zun Kong? This old man sent him a message and waited for him to come to Jingju before we came together." Oh! Something happened all of a sudden? Xiao Hua naturally asked in surprise. What happened? Zhong Daoran looked at Venerable Zun Kong. Their eyes met, as if the two had already discussed this along the way. Then, Zhong Daoran waved his hand and said in a low voice, "Let's talk after we enter the cave." All right. Xiao Hua nodded and invited the two to land. Fu Jiwen and the others were already waiting in front of the cave. Normally, when Zhong Daoran and Venerable Zun Kong knew that Fu Jiwen was Xiao Hua's disciple, they would definitely express something. But now, the two were absent-minded and only waved their hands as a greeting. They left the group of disciples outside the cave to exchange greetings and followed Xiao Hua into the quiet room. After Zhong Daoran waved his hand and laid down the restriction, he glanced at Venerable Zun Kong again and asked Xiao Hua very seriously, "Brother Xiao, tell this old man the truth. This time, at the Yaotai Mountain gathering, did that person come?" "Who?" Xiao Hua first raised his eyebrows and then frowned. As Xiao Hua expected, there were indeed rumors about Star-Lord Hall. But what puzzled him was that he did not understand who the person Zhong Daoran mentioned was. This. Xiao Hua's reaction was not out of Venerable Zun Kong and Zhong Daoran's expectations. However, Zhong Daoran was slightly embarrassed, and Venerable Zun Kong could not help but ask, "Brother Xiao, are you really not that person's subordinate?" Xiao Hua's heart moved, seeming to have thought of something. He said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists are talking about Hong, Shish." Unexpectedly, just as Xiao Hua said a word, Zhong Daoran hurriedly raised his hand, stretched out his index finger and placed it by his mouth, saying in a low voice, "Brother Xiao, this person's name can't be spoken carelessly. This old man has already reached the stage of reversing yin and yang. If we mention his name, he will sense it." Xiao Hua pondered slightly, then wrote a large Hong on the table and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoists, are you talking about this senior?" "That's right." Venerable Zun Kong and Zhong Daoran's expressions were somewhat strange. They both nodded and replied, "To be honest, ever since we returned from Yaotai Mountain, the more we thought about it, the more we felt it was strange. Because with Brother Xiao's cultivation, how could you not have a reputation in hidden immortal continent? Although Jing province is far from Yu province, it's not at the end of the world. I seem to have never heard of a cultivator in Yu province called Xiao Hua, so fellow Taoists feel that I am this senior's disciple?" Xiao Hua asked with a smile. Venerable Zun Kong nodded, "Exactly. Not only Brother Xiao's cultivation, even Brother Xiao's strength of character in the Rockfall Matrix is extremely similar to that legendary senior. Special." Zhong Daoran stared at Xiao Hua and asked again, "Before we returned to our respective caves, we received news from Yaotai Mountain. After the meeting at Yaotai Mountain, Star-Lord Hall completely sealed off Yaotai Mountain, unlike before where there were some decent ceremonies. Although Venerable Zun Kong and I don't know what happened at Yaotai Mountain, thinking about how strange it was when we came out, I feel that Star-Lord Hall has already undergone a great change. So fellow Taoists feel that I am that senior's disciple? Moreover, you feel that senior also sneaked into Yaotai Mountain?" Xiao Hua's eyes turned and he asked in reply. If that's not the case, I really can't think of any other possibility. Zhong Daoran smiled bitterly. On this hidden immortal continent, other than that senior, who else has this strength, who else has this courage, to dare to cause trouble on Yaotai Mountain? Xiao Hua laughed inwardly. The name of Grand Mist Ancestor was indeed useful. Even if he didn't use his name as a scapegoat, there would naturally be someone who would send him this so-called pillow. Xiao Hua had the intention to insinuate that Grand Mist Ancestor had sneaked into Yaotai Mountain, but he still shook his head and answered honestly, fellow Taoists, to tell you the truth, before entering Yaotai Mountain, there was a Qing Shu Daoist who came to find me, hoping that I would rely on this senior. However, I was somewhat hesitant and didn't agree. However, I also didn't refuse. After all, he was a Dao sect senior. If I could help, I would still help. Thus, I made some transactions with this Qing Shu Daoist. However, if you say that I'm this senior's disciple, I absolutely don't dare to admit it. As for whether or not this senior took the opportunity to sneak into Yaotai Mountain, I don't know. At this point, Xiao Hua's heart was moved again. He wanted to ask about the background of this Grand Mist Ancestor. Moreover, on this hidden immortal continent, other than Grand Mist Ancestor, why did Zhong Daoran feel that there was no one who had the strength to kill Kong Hongwu, who was at the upper 5th grade of essence energy? However, Xiao Hua knew that he was facing a martial grandmaster who had cultivated for several thousand years, not an inexperienced Confucian scholar like Fu Juwen. Although Zhong Daoran and Venerable Master Zun Kong spent most of their time cultivating, the saying that old people become shrewd wasn't nonsense. If he was slightly careless, he might give himself away even more. In the end, silence was gold. Venerable Master Zun Kong glanced at Zhong Daoran, nodded and said, I feel that what Brother Xiao said is true. That cultivator called Qing Shu also came to find me and promised me many benefits at the same time. It's just that I don't like restrictions, and the Yaotai gathering also has a unique treasure that I want. Therefore, like Brother Xiao, I only said some ambiguous words. Zhong Daoran let out a long sigh and shook his head slightly. Master Qing Shu didn't come to find me, but I heard about some of his actions after he got out. Since we Daoist cultivators know about these actions, then Confucian cultivators should know even more. It looked like the incident at Star-Lord Palace was caused by this old man. It should be a warning to the Immortal Palace and Confucian cultivators. The problem is, Xiao Hua continued to ask, what happened to Star-Lord Hall? How should we deal with it? No one knows what happened to Star-Lord Hall. Perhaps only Star-Lord Hall's own Star-Lord and Hall Master can know. Zhong Daoran smiled slightly at this time. What we need to do is the same as usual, just tuck our tails between our legs, that's all. However, we need to tuck our tails even tighter now to avoid being caught by Confucian cultivators. And the future of hidden immortal continent. I'm afraid there will be some storms. At this point, Zhong Daoran said apologetically, also, this old man has already sent a message to the auction that the three of us discussed. Push it back 10 years. I believe they will know about the news of Star-Lord Hall and understand our painstaking efforts. When Xiao Hua agreed, he was slightly distracted. Since Zhong Daoran's auction was postponed, what about him? Those Daoist cultivators who worked for him, should he also inform them not to go to Black Wind Ridge for the time being? However, Zun Kong disagreed and sneered. I don't think there's anything good about this. Since Star-Lord Hall's matter has nothing to do with you and me, we should do what we should do. Why should we care about what Confucian cultivators think? The more you avoid it, the more they will think that you have a guilty conscience. Moreover, Brother Xiao, you don't have to worry. Didn't you get the lot of the Imperial Preceptor in the Yaotai gathering? You should establish a country and kill Confucian cultivators. If you don't establish a country, the lot of the Imperial Preceptor can't be recorded in Star-Lord Hall. On the contrary, it will attract the attention of others. -13. Chapter 37:10. That's right, that's true. When Xiao Hua heard this, he immediately had a plan in his heart. I originally planned to return to Black Wind Ridge after exploring the ancient Forbidden Formation, But the information you two fellow Taoists had about Star-Lord Hall really scared me. Now that I've heard Brother Zun Kong's words, I'm suddenly enlightened. Since it has nothing to do with us, we don't have to worry about anything we do. If that Confucian cultivator wants to find trouble with us, he doesn't need to see if we've done anything. Forget it, forget it. Zhong Daoran waved his hand. Since Brother Xiao isn't that senior's disciple, you naturally have nothing to do with this matter. We don't need to mention this anymore. Let's talk about this ancient forbidden formation. He. Xiao Hua smiled mysteriously and waved his sleeve. Several jade eyes appeared in front of them. Take a look first. It'll definitely exceed your expectations. Sure enough, when their divine senses saw the jade eyes, both of them were greatly shocked, and it was even more so than Xiao Hua and Zhai Xingzi. Zhong Daoran even cried out involuntarily, "Why have I never thought that this cloudy mountain maze formation is actually within my Jing province?" He. Exalted Master Zun Kong laughed after recovering from his shock. Brother Daoran, although you were ahead of me before the Jade Pavilion meeting, I'm confident that I'll be able to keep pace with you after the restriction formation. Ha, I'm looking forward to it. Zhong Daoran also laughed. Right, where's Zhai Xingzi? Zun Kong only thought of Zhai Xingzi now. Where did that guy run off to? I don't know. Xiao Hua shrugged. Fellow Daoist Zhai Xing is so mysterious. I don't know if he's looking for someone or something. He disappeared with his lover. Lover? When did that guy have a dual cultivation partner? Zun Kong's eyeballs were about to fall out. That guy has always been arrogant and thinks he's on par with immortal emperors. How did he suddenly find a celestial empress? Ha, when he returns, you two will naturally know. Xiao Hua laughed. Zhong Daoran rubbed his nose and said strangely, Brother Xiao, not to mention that your luck is especially good, after this old man and Zun Kong met you, not only did we obtain 2 strange treasures, we even obtained the opportunity to enter the Misty Mountain Maze formation. Let's talk about your social relations. Zhai Xingzi usually doesn't associate with Taoism cultivators. How did you meet him? About this. Xiao Hua was slightly hesitant, and he thought for a moment before he said with a flattering smile, the reason for this is slightly related to a secret, so it's inconvenient for me to explain. Let's wait for fellow Daoist Zhai Xing to return and see what he has to say. Then I won't ask. Zun Kong said with a smile, I believe in Brother Xiao's character. Since you feel that old man Zhai Xing can get along with you, then I'll believe you for once. Let's go explore the cave abode of this tribulation transcending senior. That. Zhong Daoran hastily called out to Zun Kong and handed him a jade eye. Brother Zun Kong, take a look at this. It seems like we should also go and make some preparations. Zun Kong took a look and exchanged glances with Zhong Daoran. However, this is Jing province. I'm not too familiar with Brother Xiao, so I'll have to trouble Brother Daoran. No problem. Zhong Daoran nodded. I'll go with my disciple to various places in Jing province to borrow some magic treasures from fellow Taoists that I'm familiar with. However, it's a bit impolite to ask my disciple to go to some places. If it's convenient, I'll write down the address in the jade eye. No problem, Zun Kong said with a smile. I still have some face. If Brother Daoran has something to say, feel free to say it. Xiao Hua waved his hand. Don't count me in. I can't differentiate between north, south, east, and west. Moreover, they might not recognize me. Since that's the case, Brother Xiao, stay here and carefully inspect these jade eyes. See if there's anything you missed out. Ancient forbidden formations aren't good places. Zhong Daoran agreed very straightforwardly. Then, he and Zun Kong used 3 days to look through the contents of the jade eyes. After assigning their respective tasks, they hurriedly left with their disciples. Looking at Zhong Daoran and Zun Kong's orderly appearance, Xiao Hua's heart was even more at ease. This was the normal rhythm of entering an ancient forbidden formation. Previously, he explored the secret area purely blindly, the rhythm of courting death. Xiao Hua sent Zhong Daoran and Zun Kong off. He used his hand to pinch his chin as he thought to himself, there's no other way. They've lived for so many years. They have to know more than I do. At this point, Xiao Hua already understood that he probably wouldn't enter the misty mountain maze in a short period of time. He had the intention to go to Black Cloud Ridge, but he was afraid that the round trip would take too long. In the end, he simply didn't think about it. After all, Li Xiong was overseeing Black Cloud Ridge, and now there was also Xiongyi's help. Both of them had the experience of ruling a country. Which one of them wasn't stronger than him? What he had to do was to raise his cultivation and be their strong backing. After Zhong Daoran and Zun Kong left for a few months, their disciples returned one after another. These disciples were all respectful to Xiao Hua and didn't conceal their whereabouts and gains. Among the 10 people, 7 of them completed their master's orders. It seemed like Zhong Daoran's reputation in Jingju was still rather great. Another half a month later, Zhong Daoran and Zun Kong also returned. Both of their expressions were slightly unsightly. Xiao Hua knew that the two of them didn't have a smooth journey and didn't ask much. He only smiled and said, "I haven't seen the two of you return for so many days. I thought that the two of you had also become meat buns. Fortunately, the two of you are much stronger than Zhai Xingzi." Oh! Zun Kong was originally slightly displeased, but after hearing Xiao Hua's words, he was slightly stunned and asked curiously, "What? Old ghost Zhai Xing hasn't returned yet? Could it be that this guy really fled at the last moment?" Zhong Daoran waved his hand and said in disbelief, "Impossible. Although Zhai Xingzi's starlight is arrogant, he has always been a man of his words. What he says is absolutely trustworthy. Perhaps, he's the same as us, and has been refused entry." Chimpage. Zun Kong couldn't help but become infuriated when he heard this, and he said furiously, "Motherfucker, isn't it just borrowing a few magic treasures? What's so great about that? Wait until I come out from the cloudy mountain maze formation, I'll deal with all of you one by one." Looks like things didn't go smoothly. Only at this moment did Xiao Hua ask with a grin on his face. Zhong Daoran laughed bitterly. "Actually, it's nothing much. If it was a normal time, these fellow Taoists ought to be able to agree. But because of the matter of the Jadestage meeting, the situation in the hidden immortal continent is slightly subtle, and they don't dare arbitrarily get involved with us. Even though I participated in the Jadestage meeting, I didn't do anything, and I almost perished within the formation." Zun Kong spoke with slight indignation. Forget it, forget it." Xiao Hua's eyes spun as he waved his hand and said, "Fellow Taoists, what are the magic treasures that you didn't borrow like? Perhaps I have them here." Zhong Daoran naturally didn't believe what Xiao Hua said, and he only took it as Xiao Hua consoling himself, so he spoke of the might of the 2 magic treasures absent-mindedly. While Xiao Hua listened carefully, he instructed the green-robed Xiao Hua to search among the magic treasures that were still repaired, and further refine them. Zhong Daoran didn't care, but Zun Kong blinked his eyes and looked at Xiao Hua thoughtfully, as if he had seen something. Subsequently, Zhong Daoran and Zun Kong took back the jade eyes, and brought their disciples, Shui Ping, and a few other cultivators to discuss the details of the inside. From time to time, they would send disciples to investigate several miles away. Until more than 20 days later, a divine sense swept over from afar, and an apologetic voice came, "I came back late. I'm really sorry for the long wait." "Hey, Meat Bun is back." Zun Kong withdrew his divine sense from the jade eyes, and as he spoke, he looked into the distance. "Hey, why did Zhai Xingzi bring back a Confucian cultivator?" When Xiao Hua heard this, he immediately understood that this Confucian cultivator wasn't invited by Zhai Xingzi, and must be a close friend of Gusu Chodi. Of course, whether he was a Confucian cultivator or not, Xiao Hua and the others had to come out to welcome him. When Zhai Xingzi and the others appeared, Xiao Hua saw clearly, and he couldn't help but frown, because beside Zhai Xingzi, besides Gusu Chodi, there was actually another beautiful woman. This woman looked a little thin and weak, and her clothes were a little fluttering on her body. This woman didn't have anything special except for her high forehead and 2 extremely bright eyes. However, the very arrogant expression on this woman's face was much stronger than Zhai Xingzi's. Xiao Hua turned to look at Zun Kong and Zhong Daoran. In their eyes, besides puzzlement, there was vigilance, and it seemed that they didn't know this woman, and she didn't seem to be a famous disciple of the Jing province. Fellow Zhaixing, you've worked hard. Zhong Daoran sensed Xiao Hua's gaze, nodded slightly, and stepped forward to bow. Previously, I had some conflict with you at the Jade Pavilion conference. Now that I think about it, it's not worth it. I apologize to you. Ouch. Zhaixing Zi saw that Zhong Daoran actually went straight to the point to apologize, and even bowed, and his expression changed greatly. He hurriedly landed in front of Zhong Daoran, helped him up, and said, Brother Daoran, your words are too polite. The situation back then was different from now. You and I didn't know each other's positions. Moreover, if we're talking about apologizing, it should be me apologizing to Brother Daoran and Brother Zun Kong. I was bewitched by that brat Huda, and I didn't want to join hands with you all. Instead, I attacked Brother Daoran and Brother Zun Kong. It's really my fault. Zhong Daoran's temperament was relatively calm, and he was very clear that when entering the bewildering formation together, trust between everyone was extremely important. Thus, he apologized as soon as they met. If this were to happen to Zun Kong, he definitely wouldn't do such a thing. On the other hand, Zhaixing Zi was the same. Now that Zhong Daoran was leading the way, Zhaixing Zi hurriedly stepped back and apologized. Zun Kong naturally understood the situation and stepped forward to bow. In this way, although the three late nascent soul grandmasters who each occupied a region couldn't be said to have buried the hatchet, this kind of harmony had never been seen before. Chimpage. At this moment, an extremely untimely cold snort sounded, and a somewhat mocking female voice sounded. How hypocritical. Think about it, not long ago, you were enemies who fought to the death at the Jade Pavilion conference. How can you be so harmonious now? Can the conflict between life and death be resolved with a few words? -13. Chapter 37:11. This immortal friend is. Zhong Daoran's expression did not change as he glanced at the girl and asked. Zun Kong, who was standing at the side, was a little angry. He glared at the woman. Zhaixing Zi's face was very awkward as he quickly smiled and said, This is my wife's good friend. Then Zhaixing Zi said to Gusu Chodi, Chou, why don't you introduce her? No need to trouble Chou sister. That girl was not polite as she looked at everyone and said, This one is Gongshu Yixin. Then she looked at Xiao Hua and said proudly, You're Xiao Hua, right? You look very ordinary. Also, you used 1,000 years to cultivate to 4th level middle stage, you can't be considered a talent. However, when I saw you hiding behind everyone and apologizing to them, I feel that you're just very good at hiding yourself. Then you reveal yourself when others are not paying attention, making others feel that you're very outstanding. So much so that Chou's sister was fooled by you and said a lot of good things about you in front of me. Looks like you're not worthy. Yixin. Gusu Chodi was very embarrassed. She did not care about anything else as she quickly stopped Gongshu Yixin and smiled to everyone. This Gongshu Yixin is my good friend. She comes from the Gongshu clan and is a famous array master. Gongshu clan is Gongshu clan, Gongshu Yixin is Gongshu Yixin. Chou's sister, how can you be so unscrupulous? Gongshu Yixin frowned and said with dissatisfaction, Could it be that you've been tainted by the secular world after being banished to the mortal world? Gusu Chodi blushed and did not know how to answer. This question with a double meaning was really awesome. Xiao Hua rubbed his nose and smiled. This one is the Xiao Hua you're talking about. Of course, this one does not know how Chou's sister praised this one. This one does not care how others view this one. This one only cares about the 3 Dao friends of my Dao sect who were on par with each other and fought to the death in the Jade Pavilion gathering because of the Confucian cultivator's trap. Now that they saw their own shortcomings and knew their mistakes, they were brave enough to admit it. Even if these few simple words could not eliminate each other's wariness, but this is still an improvement. Although it's just a little bit, it's enough for them to sit together, enough for them to have the possibility of working together. What's the use of saying so much? These were all fake. Humans were selfish. When there was no conflict of interest, they could be closer than brothers. Once there was a conflict of interest, who would be able to stay true to their hearts? Who would be able to restrain their own selfish desires? Who can restrain their greed? Gongshu Isin retorted without any trace of politeness. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at Gongshu Yixin. He said with a smile, Miss is very insightful and understands a lot. It's a pity, you've lost a lot because of this. Old Senior Xiao, save it. Gongshu Yixin said coldly, in this world, there are too many hypocrites like you, that's why the world is so foul. If everyone was as magnanimous as me, how could there be so much trouble? Yixin, take a look. Gusu Chodi raised her hand. It was the location of the Misty Mountain Maze. She smiled and said, that is the famous Misty Mountain Maze. No one has been able to break it for tens of millions of years. Come, I will accompany you to take a look. Hearing this, Gongshu Yixin's eyes lit up, she said anxiously, is that so? Right here. Let's go, sister will accompany me to take a look. Gusu Chodi winked at Xiao Hua and left with Gongshu Yixin. Xiao Hua touched his nose helplessly and looked at Zhai Xingzi, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Zhai Xingzi, what's the matter with this girl? Zun Kong Shangren didn't care so much and shouted, if Deity Xiao was not here, don't blame this old man for not giving face. Sorry. Zhai Xingzi knew he was in the wrong and hurriedly said with a smile, I believe Deity Xiao has already told you two fellow Taoists. As soon as this old man arrived here, I heard this was the Misty Mountain Maze. I began to plan how to break this great formation. My humble wife transmitted that she knew a great formation master. This old man knew that our Dao Sex formation Dao had been lost for a long time. If we could find a great formation master, it would naturally be of great help to us. Therefore, this old man didn't tell Deity Xiao. I wanted to give everyone a surprise and went with my humble wife to find her. Unexpectedly, this lady Gongshu was really famous. There were many people begging her to break formations. She wouldn't meet with ordinary people. Because my humble wife was close friends with her, my humble wife was able to meet her. Unfortunately, when my humble wife met her, the Gongshu clan's clan head happened to have a clan order for her to help someone set up a formation. Naturally, she didn't dare to disobey the clan order. This old man and my humble wife could only accompany her. See, we were delayed after a round trip. However, this trip also broadened this old man's horizons. This Gongshu Yixin's formation Dao is indeed formidable. That, a clan within 1,000 li radius was protected by her formation. In this old man's eyes, without the strength of mid-5th level origin energy, I'm afraid it's impossible to break through. Hiss. Zun Kong Shangren sucked in a breath and said in surprise, this little girl seems to only be mid-4th level origin energy. The formation she set up is actually so formidable. That's not the only thing that's formidable. Zhai Xingzi said with a smile, Brother Zun Kong, do you know why this little girl is so arrogant and doesn't put us late-stage nascent soul cultivators in her eyes? Why? Even Zhong Daoran was curious in his heart. Because, Zhai Xingzi said in a low voice, this lady Gongshu is only around 600 years old this year. Hiss. Zhong Daoran sucked in a breath of cold air. Zun Kong Shangren directly shouted, damn it, how is that possible? This girl is only around 600 years old. If she's this old man's disciple, I'm afraid she hasn't even cultivated to spirit solitude yet. If her talent is better, she should be able to cultivate to mid-golden core stage. Zhai Xingzi said with a smile, when my humble wife told this old man was also shocked. This old man has never seen a cultivator who cultivates at such a godly speed. Gaga. Zun Kong Shangren laughed, you're Xiao Hua right. You look very ordinary. Moreover, you used 1,000 years to cultivate to mid-4th level origin energy. You can't be considered a genius. Zun Kong Shangren's voice was still sharp, obviously imitating Gongshu Yixin. Hearing this, Zhai Xingzi laughed loudly. Even Zhong Daoran shook his head slightly. At this time, who still didn't know what Gusu Chodi was thinking? She obviously praised Xiao Hua like a flower, wanting to get Gongshu Yixin closer to Xiao Hua. Who knew that she didn't even put Xiao Hua in her eyes? Hee. Xiao Hua didn't care. He touched his nose and said, actually, the most amazing thing is not this. Oh. What else is there? How do you know? Zhai Xingzi was very stunned. Soon after, he somewhat understood, Daoist Xiao must have heard of Gongshu Yixin before. No, this Xiao has never heard of Lady Gongshu's name. Xiao Hua said with a smile, today is the first time this Xiao has seen her. Then how do you know? Zun Kong Shangren was also very curious. Very simple. Xiao Hua said with a smile, but those who are infatuated with the path of formation will inevitably have distractions and can't concentrate on cultivation. Yet this Lady Gongshu actually used 600 years of cultivation to reach mid-4th level origin energy. Moreover, her path of formation has reached large success. Normal talent is very difficult to reach. Right, that's exactly the case. Zhai Xingzi suddenly realized and nodded. No wonder when this old man praised her for her high cultivation at a young age, she was still somewhat disdainful. If Chioa wasn't beside me, she would definitely ridicule this old man. Ignorant of worldly affairs, only looking at one's heart, ignoring worldly affairs, and concentrating on cultivation. Zhong Daoran also understood, it seems that there are gains and losses. She is a disciple of the Gongshu family. Her starting point is different from ours. Even if she has flaws on her body, it doesn't count for much in the eyes of others. Zun Kong Shangren smiled coldly. Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and said thoughtfully, isn't this what the people of the secular world say? A white face covers 100 ugliness? Ha ha ha, this girl is not only white, but also not ugly. Zun Kong Shangren laughed loudly. The group of disciples standing at the side also couldn't help but laugh. Let's go. We should also go take a look at the Great Formation. Xiao Hua knew that Zun Kong Shangren was teasing him, but he didn't care. Fellow Daoist has already reached this level. Even if they don't become sworn brothers, what difference is there between them? Good Tilda, let us also take a look at this Gongshu family girl's method. Zhai Xingzi extended his hand and invited Zhong Daoran to go first. Zhong Daoran thought for a moment, nodded at everyone, and flew up first. He was the oldest, and his cultivation had also reached the peak of the late nascent soul stage. Not counting Xiao Hua's methods, just looking at Xiao Hua's cultivation, it was reasonable for Zhong Daoran to be the leader. Fellow Daoists, please go first. Xiao Hua saw Zhong Daoran fly up and said with a bitter smile, I was just ridiculed by the little girl, so I'll look for confidence from fellow Daoist. Haha, Daoist is already not bad. Zhai Xingzi smiled. Seeing that Zun Kong Shangren didn't move, he cupped his hands and flew up with Zhong Daoran. Zun Kong Shangren waited for Zhai Xingzi to leave, then smiled and followed behind. Xiao Hua flew at the back. In this way, the position of the 4 Daoists of the hidden immortal continent was confirmed. The group of cultivators did not release their divine sense. After flying for several li, they saw a huge mountain that looked like a steamed bun covering an area of 100 li. The mountain was covered with strange rocks, and there were small bumps that looked like stone chains tied to the mountain peak. Looking at the bottom of the mountain, they saw a meandering river rushing into the mountain peak from one end, then rushing out from the other side. It made a few twists and turns at the foot of the mountain, then plunged back into the mountain peak. When it came out again, it was on the other side of the mountain. After a few more twists and turns, a huge river surrounded the entire mountain peak on the ground. There were some green trees on the mountain, and they were scattered very unevenly. Similarly, there were also some thorns mixed with these green trees. Occasionally, some strange hissing sounds would come from somewhere in the mountain, but when they looked, they didn't see any wild beasts. -13. Chapter 37:12. Similarly, the river at the edge of the mountain continued to flow, but there was a hint of green fluorescence in it. There were no fish or aquatic plants to be seen. At the riverside, there were also fist-sized cobblestones. Each one was smoother than the next, shining under the sunlight. Aquatic plants that were usually seen at the riverside were nowhere to be seen here. Only a few thousand feet away from the riverside, there were sparse aquatic plants and moss. Only then did some tiny grasshoppers and other small things become active. The mountain looked a little strange, but when one's divine sense swept out, there were no fluctuations of magic power. Even the chi of heaven and earth was no different from other places. There were no signs of condensation. Furthermore, At the far end of the mountain, there was a large forest. The trees were lush, and the wind blew. It was full of vitality. Apart from the place where Xiao Hua and the others came from, there was a large flat area that was several li wide. On the other side of the mountain, there were even taller mountain ranges. It seemed that those two mountain ranges were precipitous and had strange peaks that were even more imposing than this mountain. When Xiao Hua and the others arrived, Gusu Chodi and Gongshu Isin weren't near them. They probably went to the side to explore. Xiao Hua and the others didn't mind. Zhong Daoran looked to the left, then turned to Xue Ping and the others and said, "After I got your jade eyes, I studied it carefully. I found that your opinions were not unanimous. Some said this was the Four Gates Dragon Binding Formation, some said it was the Milky Way Spirit Sealing Formation, and some said it was the Gold Water Flat Hill Formation. Now that we are going to break the formation, we have to understand the formation first." Xue Ping said respectfully, "Senior, please know that I was the first to arrive at this place according to the map. However, I'm not well versed in the Tao of array formations. Based on the trajectory of the mountain and the few jade eyes I have, I discovered that the ridges on the mountain are like chains. Furthermore, the mountain is above the water, which is very similar to the Four Gates Dragon Binding Array passed down in ancient times. As for the other formations, they are the opinions of the other Taoists. Of course, I know that our cultivation is shallow and our knowledge is even more limited. These things are recorded in the jade eyes for reference." "It's nothing." Zhong Daoran nodded, then looked towards Zhai Xingzi and Xiao Hua, asking, "Fellow Taoists, what do you think?" Zhai Xingzi smiled and said, "I've thought about it before, and I've even looked at the terrain here. But now that the formation master of the Gongshu family is here, I'd better not embarrass myself." "Haha, that's right." Xiao Hua also said with a smile, "Everyone has their shortcomings and strengths. The matter of breaking the array should be left to Miss Gongshu." When Zhong Daoran was about to speak, Zun Kong waved his hand and said, "Although the girl from the Gongshu family is a formation master, all she knows is origin formations. We are Dao sect cultivators and Senior Kang Lung's cave is also a Dao sect formation. Even if we listen to the girl's opinion, we can't embarrass the Dao sect. We still have to say what we want to say." This old man had some misgivings earlier. "Now, I'm going to take a closer look. When I find something, I'll discuss it with you." "All right." Zhong Daoran nodded. "This old man will go with you." Then, he said to Xiao Hua, "Brother Xiao, follow fellow Daoist Zhai Xing to find the girl from the Gongshu family." Xiao Hua thought for a moment and said, "That girl is obviously disgusted with me. I'd better not provoke her. Fellow Daoist Zhai Xing can go by himself." "Fine." Zhai Xingzi knew that Gusu Chodi helped Xiao Hua and felt a little self-defeating. He smiled and said, "This old man will go by himself. Spiritual master, take these disciples and stand guard by the side." After saying that, the three of them flew away. Xiao Hua said to Xue Ping and the others, "Let's go. Take this old man and take a look at this large array." "Yes." Xue Ping and the others were very respectful. They took Xiao Hua from the foot of the mountain and explored bit by bit. As they walked, they explained to Xiao Hua and took out the jade eyes from time to time to explain. At first, Xiao Hua only nodded slightly and didn't speak, as if he didn't know anything about arrays. However, after half a meal, when Xue Ping pointed to a place and explained his array, Xiao Hua opened his mouth and pointed to that place to refute Xue Ping. He also began to explain the method of setting up the array in simple terms. Although Xiao Hua only spoke to Fu Jiwen, Xue Ping and the others heard him clearly. At first, other than Fu Jiwen who listened carefully, the others didn't care. However, gradually, a few cultivators who had studied the large array in depth, including Xue Ping, began to change their expressions. Their faces became more respectful and admiring. They compared the jade eyes and the large array's problems with Xiao Hua's explanation and solved them one by one. Although the other cultivators didn't understand the Tao of arrays, they knew that Xiao Hua also knew about arrays. They hurriedly listened attentively, unwilling to let go of this rare opportunity. Xiao Hua led the group of cultivators and explained as they flew. He also asked the cultivators who had studied the array to share their opinions. Although the mountain was only 50 kilometers in size, it took a lot of time to fly around. However, when the group of cultivators flew back to their original place, they still didn't see Zhai Xingzi or Zhong Daoran's summons. Xiao Hua understood that Gong Shu Isin and Zun Kong must have encountered a difficult problem and didn't dare to easily break the array. In fact, although Xiao Hua himself taught Fujiwen and the others a lot of the Tao of arrays based on this large array, it had nothing to do with breaking the array. He himself was also confused about this large array. This was a large array set up by a cultivator who had passed the tribulation. How could it be easy to break? Fujiwen, according to what I said, take a look at it yourself. This kind of ancient forbidden array is really hard to come by. It's a good opportunity. Xiao Hua waved his hand. It's quite difficult to get started with the Tao of arrays, but you have the foundation after all. Now that you've combined it with this large array, you'll be able to grasp it well. Of course, what I said is only my understanding. It's only a general explanation of the array and the array collected by Xueping and the others. It's still very far from breaking the array. Or to put it bluntly, I'm just drawing on gourds and ladles. What I said has nothing to do with the real Misty Mountain Maze array. Do you understand? Yes, this junior understands. Fujiwen replied respectfully. Senior, you're just stringing together the Tao of arrays that Xueping and the others found. It has nothing to do with the Misty Mountain Maze array. This junior doesn't dare to rashly break the array based on what I just learned. It's good that you understand. Xiao Hua nodded and motioned for Fujiwen to comprehend it himself. Xueping and the others were well aware of this and bowed to Xiao Hua. Thank you, senior. Then, they flew to various places and combined what Xiao Hua said to verify what they had learned. Their previous thoughts were very simple. No matter what kind of array it was, they just needed to break it. However, now that they saw a late-stage nascent soul senior being so serious and not daring to casually make a move, they rejoiced even more. Xiao Hua flew into the sky and scanned with his divine sense. As expected, Gong Shu Yixin in front of him was frowning. She raised her right index finger and gently scratched her nose. A faint silver light flashed between her eyes. It was obvious that she had some unresolved questions. Looking to the right, Venerable Master Zun Kong had already released Chang'eng. The monkey was also flying in the air, its eyes flashing with brilliance. Its long tail shook slightly in the air. The monkey flew to one place after another, not staying for long at any place. Venerable Master Zun Kong's expression was somewhat unsightly. Zhai Xingzi saw Xiao Hua flying over and was about to come over. Xiao Hua waved his hand at him and transmitted his voice. Fellow Daoist, you don't have to come over. I'll go take a look too. Oh. Daoist knows about arrays too? Zhai Xingzi was a little surprised, but he didn't move. Xiao Hua smiled. I know a little, but compared to the Gongshu family's girl, I'm still lacking a lot. Seeing Xiao Hua fly away, Zhai Xingzi's expression changed. He transmitted his voice to Gusu Chodi. When Gusu Chodi heard that Xiao Hua also knew about arrays, she couldn't help but be stunned. She took a few more glances at Xiao Hua's back. Clearly, the impression Xiao Hua gave her was even more mysterious. Meanwhile, Xiao Hua flew to the other side of the mountain. He raised his hand and patted. It was really between his eyebrows. He saw that the delusion breaker Dharma eye was flashing with a dark green halo. The Dharma eye gradually opened, and the silver-white pupils were revealed without any emotions. Hiss. When the Dharma eye saw the situation in front of him, Xiao Hua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He saw that below him, an oval-shaped light circle was flashing with a faint golden and green brilliance. Vaguely, there were some words flashing within the golden brilliance and green brilliance. However, Xiao Hua's Dharma eye couldn't distinguish them clearly. Moreover, this golden and green brilliance was very restrained. There wasn't even a trace of ripple spreading out. There was even a slightly black fog blocking the surface of the brilliance. However, this fog was extremely thin, as if it was transparent. Not only that, outside of this fog, there were chain-like brilliances that crisscrossed and bound the entire chicken. These chains not only blocked the golden and green brilliance, but also locked the fog. Opposite these chains, there was a thin and long green belt of light. It pierced through a section of the chicken like a needle piercing through a seam. Within the halo, it pierced through the chicken where the chains weren't. The chains were outside, the belt of light was inside. The chains didn't move, and the belt of light flowed. They seemed to really complement each other, imprisoning the entire chicken on the ground. Damn it, what kind of array is this? Xiao Hua was somewhat dumbfounded. How do I break it? After looking for a while, Xiao Hua still didn't have any clue. However, his heart was moved again. His figure began to fly, flying in the direction of the golden and green brilliance. After waiting for an hour, the corners of Xiao Hua's mouth revealed a smile. He secretly said in his heart, as expected, when Xiao Hua was about to go to the side to take a look, Zhai Xingzi's voice transmitted to his ear, "What did Reverend see? If you didn't find anything, please turn back. Gong Shuisin already knows how to break it." "Oh, this little girl is really powerful," Xiao Hua agreed, secretly thinking in his heart. When Xiao Hua flew back, Zunkong Shangren and the others were already standing around Gong Shuisin, clustered around her like stars surrounding the moon. -13. Chapter 37:13. Gong Shu Yixin's face was a little red, and her sparkling eyes showed a kind of excitement. Apparently, she had found her favorite thing. Gong Shu Yixin saw Xiao Hua fly back and asked with a smile, "Senior Xiao, what did you find?" Gong Shu Yixin's words didn't have any malice, but it was absolutely harsh in the ears of others. Xiao Hua looked at this proud girl and knew that she was loved by all. He wouldn't lower himself to her level. He smiled and replied, "I didn't see anything. Even if I did, it's just some stupid opinions. Why don't I listen to Miss Gongshu's opinion first?" "Then what about Senior Zunkong?" Gong Shu Yixin's lips curled up slightly, but it was a smug smile that wasn't easily noticed by others. She looked away from Xiao Hua and turned to ask Zunkong Shangren. The corner of Zunkong Shangren's right eye twitched slightly. Apparently, he was a little unhappy. If it was an ordinary disciple, Zunkong Shangren would have already taught him a lesson. However, although Gong Shu Yixin was a little arrogant, she came to help after all. Zhai Xingzi was standing next to her. Even if Zunkong Shangren was angry, he couldn't vent it on this Confucian junior. Zunkong Shangren glared fiercely at Zhai Xingzi, who was standing next to Gong Shu Yixin with an obsequious smile. He rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Little girl, this old man is not proficient in the art of formations. I just happened to obtain an ancient jade slip 1,000 years ago, which roughly explained the mysteries of formations. Unfortunately, even so, I can't understand it with my talent. As for why I stepped forward to explore this Jade Mountain formation, it was because of my beast pet." Zunkong Shangren proudly patted the spirit monkey Changeng next to him. "My Changeng was born with the ability to see through the void. He can see through many formations. You." Gong Shu Yixin blushed. She really couldn't compare to Zunkong Shangren in terms of cunning. Even if she wanted to refute, she couldn't. Because as soon as she opened her mouth, she would be on the same level as Zunkong Shangren's Changeng. However, Gong Shu Yixin wasn't going to give up easily. She rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Elder Zunkong, Junior seems to have heard that there is a Tai Bai Jinxing immortal official called Changeng in the Immortal Palace. How come your demon pet has the same name as him? If he knew about this, he would definitely fly into a rage, right?" Ha ha ha. Unexpectedly, Zunkong Shangren was simply a troublemaker. He was not afraid at all. He stroked Changgeng's small head and laughed loudly. Changgeng, when did you go to the Immortal Palace to be a high official? Why didn't I know about it?" In a flash, Gong Shu Yixin understood that Zunkong Shangren deliberately named his demon pet Changgeng in order to humiliate the Confucian immortal cultivator in the Immortal Palace. It would be fine if Tai Bai Jinxing didn't know, but if he told Tai Bai Jinxing, what would Tai Bai Jinxing do? Perhaps at that time, Tai Bai Jinxing would not be angry at Master Zunkong, but himself. Gong Shu Yixin was not stupid, but she had seen through a lot of the ways of the world. Once she understood, she fell into an awkward situation again. Fortunately, Gusu Chodi hurriedly said with a smile, "Fellow immortal Zun Kong, quickly tell us what you found." "It wasn't me who found it, it was my Chang Gang who found it." Exalted Master Zun Kong had a smile on his face as he emphasized again. Then, he pointed at the spot that Chang'eng had been looking at and said, "Xue Ping and company's guesses are basically correct. However, they don't understand array formations after all. They are only following the picture and can only see the surface and one-sided. According to Chang'eng's observation, there are two formations fused together. One of them should be the famous 9-dragon bone battle. Take a look. The ridges on this mountain are made up of 9 dragon souls. Senior Kang Langzi condensed them into chains to seal the entire formation. If we can't break the 9-dragon bone battle, we won't be able to reveal the cave. What else?" Gongshu Yixin asked with a smile, as if she had a card up her sleeve. Zun Kong Shangren looked at the smile and immediately understood the meaning behind it. However, since he had already said it and used Chang'eng's name, he was not afraid of making a fool of himself. Then he pointed at the long river and said, "This long river is similar to Xue Ping's observation. It's also a formation. If I'm not wrong, it should be the 9 yin demon subduing formation. However, this formation is a hidden one, which should complement the 9-dragon bone battle formation. One is bright and one is dark, one is yin and one is yang. If we want to show Senior Kang Langzi's cave residence, we have to break the 2 formations at the same time. If we break one first, the other formations will counterattack. Of course, if we can't break any of the formations, the yin and yang formations will counterattack together, which will be more powerful. Presumably, the vision recorded in the Jade Eyes is that we can't break the formations at the same time and cause the formation to counterattack." Clap clap. Before Zhong Daoran and the others could speak, Gongshu Yixin clapped her hands and said, "Senior Zun Kong is indeed amazing. You really saw through this formation. He, little girl." Hearing Gongshu Yixin's praise, Zun Kong Shangren didn't look happy at all. He said faintly, "You should say the but first." As expected, Gongshu Yixin continued, "But you only saw through 30 to 40% of the formation. If you break the formation, I'm afraid we won't have any chance to enter." 30 to 40%. Not to mention Zun Kong Shangren, even Zhai Xingzi and the others were shocked. If what Gongshu Yixin said was true, the 9-dragon bone lock formation and the 9 yin demon subduing formation were only 30 to 40%, then didn't that mean there were still 2 or 3 other formations? They had never heard of a formation that could combine 4 great formations into one. Gusu Chodi was also surprised. "Yixin, are you sure you saw it correctly?" "Hehe, Sister Chiu, my Gongshu family's silver moon eyes are not inferior to the immortal palace's golden eyes. If I can't see it, who can?" Gongshu Yixin replied proudly. "That's true." Gusu Chodi nodded. Sister's clear eyes technique didn't seem to be able to see anything, but... Gongshu Yixin raised her voice. "Seniors, before I break the formation, I want to make it clear that when Sister Chiu invited me, I didn't ask for anything. It's not that I don't have any requests, I just want to see if I can break the formation. Now that I'm sure I can break the formation, I'll first discuss the conditions with you seniors." Zhong Daoran nodded. "Lady Gongshu, please state your conditions. As long as they are reasonable, we'll agree." "I have 2 conditions." Gongshu Yixin replied confidently. "First, I have the right to choose first from the items in Senior Kang Langzi's cave residence." "No." Zun Kong Shangren sneered. "Senior Kang Langzi is a Daoist senior. The items inside are all Daoist treasures. You're a Confucian disciple. What do you want them for?" "Yes, Zun Kong Shangren's opinion is also our opinion." Xiao Hua nodded. Since Xiao Hua had spoken, Zhai Xingzi also smiled and said, "Miss Gongshu, this old man knows that you don't care about the difference between Confucianism and Taoism, so this old man won't hide it from you. One of the reasons why we entered Senior Kang Langzi's Immortal's cave was to obtain his orthodoxy." "Yes, I understand." Gongshu Yixin interrupted Zhai Xingzi impolitely, but it was this interruption that revealed her determination to enter the cave residence. Gongshu Yixin said, "In that case, I can take a step back. Except for the Daoist cultivation method jade slips, I want the right to choose first. How about this? Xiao Hua said, you can choose first from the formation items. As for the other items, you don't have to take first. Fine. Although Gongshu Yixin was arrogant, she was also straightforward. She nodded, then I'll talk about the second condition. How many conditions do you have? Zhong Daoran frowned and asked. Just these two. Good, please. Zhong Daoran saw Xiao Hua's calmness and was relieved. The second condition is, in addition to the cultivation method, I want 50% of the treasures, medicinal pills, formations, and other items. Gongshu Yixin's bright eyes curved into crescents. She knew her conditions were harsh, but Zhong Daoran and the others had to agree. Sure enough, Zhong Daoran heard this and felt bitter. The reason was obvious. Without Gongshu Yixin, they couldn't break the formation and enter the cave residence. But even if he allowed Gongshu Yixin to break the formation, with her cultivation level, she wouldn't be able to do it. The ones doing the work would still be the Daoist cultivators themselves. They put in a lot of effort, but a bossy Confucian cultivator took half of it. Zhong Daoran couldn't accept it. Zhong Daoran didn't want to agree, but other than Gongshu Yixin, who could break the formation? No. Exalted Master Zun Kong immediately spoke and pointed at Xueping and the others. Senior Kang Lung's cave abode was discovered by these Dao sect disciples, so they should have 20% of the items inside. We should take 60% while the remaining 20% belongs to you. Hehe, then I'll have to ask all of you seniors to break the formation yourselves. I still want to live to see the sun rise tomorrow. Gongshu Yixin didn't have any intention of bargaining and said with a smile. How about this? Gusu Chodi naturally stepped forward and said with a smile, Yixin, I don't want my share. You take 30%. After all, Senior Daoran and Daoist Xiao are the main force. Without them, even if you know the method, you can't break the formation, right? Says who? Gongshu Yixin retorted, my Gongshu clan has no lack of 4th or 5th level cultivators. As long as there's an ancient maze formation here, it's easy to call a few over. -13. Chapter 37:14. Xiao Hua heard Gongshu Yixin's tone and felt a bit better. He didn't know if he cared about Gusu Chodi's face or if he met his own expectations. He thought for a bit and said, Miss Gongshu, if you want to invite Gongshu family cultivators, I think, you should invite some 6th level essence energy cultivators. If those 5th level upper level Confucian cultivators come, even if they suppress the 2 outer formations, they won't be able to stop the inner formation's attack. They won't be able to see tomorrow's sun. Ah! Gongshu Yixin's expression changed, she almost shouted in disbelief. You, how did you know? It doesn't matter how I know, what I care about is. Xiao Hua said faintly, if you don't agree to this 30%, we'll have to break the formation ourselves. At that time, you won't even get 30%. Chmph, if I can't get it then I can't. Gongshu Yixin snorted, you just saw through the flaws, I don't believe you can, he. Gusu Chodi quickly laughed, Yixin is joking, since you can see through the flaws, isn't it just right to help Yixin break the formation? Everyone can study the formation together, isn't that better? Yixin, tell me what you've found out. Hmph, Elder Xiao first. Gongshu Yixin thought for a bit and nodded, but she still looked at Xiao Hua angrily. Xiao Hua smiled and stretched out his hand. Shrugging his shoulders, he said, this old man didn't say that he saw any flaws. This is what the young lady said. I was just guessing. You. Gongshu Yixin was so angry she almost vomited blood. She said everything herself. Xiao Hua didn't say how she knew there was an origin formation inside. I don't believe you, you didn't see it, how do you know there's an origin formation inside? At this time, Gongshu Yixin was no different from a little girl who was vindictive. She completely exposed the purity of her cultivation. Xiao Hua said, what's so hard about that? Kang Lungzi was a tribulation senior. This formation had been attacked by Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, and demon cultivators, but it had not been broken. Obviously, Kang Lungzi was a master of formations. It would not be strange if the defensive formation he had set up had 3 or 4 layers, let alone 2. Even if there are origin formations, Buddhist formations, and demonic formations inside, this old man wouldn't be surprised. This old man only said that there's an origin array inside. What's there to be surprised about? You. Gongshu Yixin was completely speechless. Xiao Hua's words were really not wrong. He didn't need any special silver moon eyes. He could guess it just by thinking about it. Of course, there was an essential difference between seeing and guessing. The problem was that she had mixed up what she saw with what Xiao Hua had guessed. She thought that Xiao Hua had also discovered it, which was why she had given in. H. You stinky men only know how to bully us weak women. Gusu Chodi smiled and pulled Gongshu Yixin's arm. Don't lower yourself to the same level as these men. Quick, show them what you found and let them know the power of us women. Also teach them what it means to be a woman who is not inferior to a man. Gusu Chodi's words were obviously biased towards an outsider. Gongshu Yixin was straightforward but not an idiot. Of course she could hear it. But she also knew that this was a way out and she should take advantage of it. Thinking for a moment, Gongshu Yixin fiercely glared at old Senior Xiao and pointed with her finger. It's exactly as old Senior Xiao guessed. This guest was very heavy. Moreover, Xiao Hua's face that was stared at by the Gongshu family's Silver Moon Eyes secret technique twitched slightly as if he was stung by a wasp. Speaking of formations, Gongshu Yixin seemed to have changed into a different person. She was no longer arrogant, willful, or haggling. Instead, her face was full of excitement as if she would be happy even if you didn't give her a single primordial stone. She pointed with her finger and said, this formation is divided into 2 layers as old Senior Xiao guessed. The outer layers are 2 Taoist formations. However, they are not the 9 Dragons Bonelock formation and the 9 Yin Exorcism formation, but the Xianqing Spirit Forbidding formation and the Blue Sky Spring formation. The 2 formations that old Senior Zun Kong mentioned are similar to the 2 formations that I mentioned, but there are essential differences. The 9 Dragons Bonelock formation is a defensive formation, while the 9 Yin Exorcism formation is a suppressing formation. Old Senior Kang Langzi wouldn't place the 9 Yin Exorcism formation outside his cave residence to suppress himself, right? Zun Kong blinked his eyes and didn't say anything. The Xianqing Spirit Forbidding formation and the Blue Sky Spring formation are different. They are both offensive formations. People often say that the strongest defense is offense. Old Senior Kang Langzi must know this very well. Of course, one of these 2 formations is in the light and the other is in the dark. It's just as old Senior Zun Kong said. Gongshu Yixin continued, however, the difference between the Xianqing Spirit Forbidding formation and the 9 Dragons Bonelock formation is that the Spirit Forbidding formation doesn't have a dragon vein inside. Instead, it imprisons a formation spirit. With this formation spirit, the entire formation isn't static. It's constantly changing, making it unpredictable and impossible to break. The most amazing thing is that the Emerald Spring formation is a concealment formation. The Emerald Spring formation is the softest of yin. It is also invisible and ever-changing. I can't be sure if there is a formation spirit in the Emerald Spring formation, but even if there is only one formation spirit, the 2 formations complemented each other and were equivalent to 3 independent formation. Formation spirit? Xiao Hua frowned. What's that? Is it a formation spirit? No. Gongshu Yixin shook her head. Formation spirit, that's just a legend. Not to mention this one doesn't know about it, even my Gongshu family, and even the Confucian inheritance have never had this kind of formation spirit. The formation spirit I'm talking about is the demon spirit, living soul, or beast soul imprisoned inside the formation. These formation spirits can not only increase the flexibility of the formation, but the more powerful the formation spirit is, the more powerful the formation will be. Oh, I see. Xiao Hua understood. Then what's the origin formation I'm talking about? Gongshu Yixin rolled her eyes at Xiao Hua and said, in addition to the 2 Taoist formations outside the Misty Mountain Maze formation, there are 2 more formations inside. What? Zhai Xingzi was shocked. 2 origin formations? No, one is an origin formation, and the other is a Buddhist formation. Gongshu Isin shook her head. However, my silver moon eyes are not strong enough. I can only see the origin formation and the Buddhist formation from the floors of the two Daoist formations. I can't tell what kind of formations they are for now. Only after we break the two Daoist formations can I begin to break these two formations. But, seniors don't worry about the origin formation. Senior Kang Lungzi is a Taoist senior after all. This one has some confidence in breaking his origin formation. Girl, didn't you say it just now? If we don't break the two formations inside at the same time, when we break the two outer formations, will we be attacked by the two inner formations? Zun Kong Shangren frowned and asked, why do we have to wait until the end? Gongshu Isin nodded, if the inner formation is a Taoist formation, this one can't do anything about it. But since it's a Confucian origin formation, this one has confidence that it won't be activated. Xiao Hua nodded. What he saw was similar to what Gongshu Isin saw, but he saw it more clearly. Thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua looked at Zun Kong Shangren and said a few words through voice transmission. Zun Kong Shangren frowned and looked at Xiao Hua with surprise. He waved his hand and Chang Gung flew out to a place in the formation. At this time, Gongshu Isin frowned and said, but Kang Lungzi's Misty Mountain Maze formation is very strange. This one has a question. I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I still can't figure it out. Since we're going to break the formation together, this one will be frank with you seniors. Oh, what's so strange about it? Zhong Daoran asked. As the saying goes, flowing water doesn't rot and the pivot doesn't rust. The ordinary blue sky spring formation uses the cold living spring of the 9 underworlds, but the spring water of this Misty Mountain Maze formation is obviously not the 9 underworlds yin water, so the formation's power is reduced a lot. Also, if it weren't for the jade eyes of the seniors who knew about the Misty Mountains Maze formation, I wouldn't have been able to see through it with my clear eyes technique. This Misty Mountain Maze formation conceals its magic power and noble spirit very well. There's not a trace of it outside the surface. What's so strange about it? Zhai Xingzi asked curiously. Of course it's strange. Gongshu Isin smiled. We Confucian cultivators need to absorb noble spirit into our bodies. You seniors also need to absorb heaven and earth yuan qi to refine your bodies, right? It's the same for origin formations and magic formations. Without noble spirit and heaven and earth yuan qi, these magic formations and origin formations can't last long, not to mention this Misty Mountain Maze formation is from ancient time. What do you mean? Xiao Hua's heart also moved as he thought of a possibility. From what this one knows, this Misty Mountain Maze formation must have an inner layer. This inner layer can absorb heaven and earth yuan qi and noble spirit. Gongshu Isin nodded, especially, Senior Kang Lungzi handled this inner layer very well. Even if there are fluctuations of magic power and noble spirit, it won't be noticed by others. How is that possible? Zhai Xingzi shook his head. As long as there are fluctuations, it will be noticed by others. Fellow Zhai Xingzi. Xiao Hua was now somewhat convinced by Gongshu Isin. Didn't Miss Gongshu just say? Flowing water doesn't rot, the pivot doesn't rust. When will the fluctuations and noble spirit not be noticed? Naturally, it's when heaven and earth yuan qi or noble spirit flows. Zhai Xingzi's eyes brightened, as if he had thought of something. That's right. Just when everyone was shocked, Gongshu Isin said proudly, Senior Kang Lungzi is your Taoist sect's formation master. How can his cave be discovered so easily? The array formation of the old man's cave abode, or rather, the old man's cave abode should be mobile under the activation of the array formation. It's not fixed in one place. -13. Chapter 37:15. That's right. Hearing this, Zhai Xingzi slapped his thigh and exclaimed, that's right, that Cloudy Mountain Maze formation should be at Yongzhou's Cloudy Mountain. How could it run to Jingzhou? Xue Ping and the others were thoroughly convinced. They had never understood why the Cloudy Mountain Maze formation would be in Jingzhou. Moreover, so many Daoist and Confucian cultivators were searching for it, how could it be found by small cultivators like them? So the maze formation could move. Gongshu Isin's words immediately revealed the answer to this mystery. Actually, Senior Kang Lang's cave abode probably wasn't called Cloudy Mountain Maze Formation before. It was probably discovered when it first appeared in Yongzhou's Cloudy Mountain, so it was named after it. Gongshu Isin looked puzzled. What I'm puzzled about is that based on the current situation, Senior Kang Lang's cave abode doesn't show any signs of moving. This situation has been going on for at least 10 years. Otherwise, with Xueping and the others' cultivation, it's very unlikely that they'd discover this cave abode. Xiao Hua nodded. Gongshu Isin's puzzlement perfectly explained why Xueping was so lucky to discover this Cloudy Mountain Maze Formation. He probed. Brother Daoran said earlier that time is the best method to crack all great formations. Perhaps it's because the array outside Senior Kang Lang's abode is too old, and it's hard for the array to not be damaged as it moves. Today, the array can no longer support itself, so it stopped here. What Senior Xiao said is the most likely possibility. Gongshu Isin nodded. I can't see the situation inside the cave abode, so I can only guess. Let's not worry about this for now. Zhong Daoran smiled. Miss, since you've analyzed the formation so clearly, do you have a way to crack it? That's right. Master Zun Kong also asked. This great formation was baptized by many experts in the past, but none of them could break it. How confident are we? 60%. Gongshu Isin smiled very confidently. Girl, you're bragging. Master Zun Kong laughed. 60% is basically enough to crack it. Senior Zun Kong. Gongshu Isin smiled. What is recorded in the Jade Eye is the situation when Senior Kang Langzi was meditating in the cave. At that time, the formation was controlled by Senior Kang Langzi. It is very different from the current one. In terms of power alone, it would be reduced by at least 40%. Didn't old Senior Xiao mention it just now? Time is the best method to break a formation. This cave abode can't even move, and the Jadefall Spring formation has been replaced. Even the surface of the formation has a flaw. From what I know, its power has been reduced by another 30%. In other words, 30% of the initial power of the Misty Mountain Maze formation should not be a problem for all of you seniors who are at the upper tier of the 4th grade and under my command. Gigi. At this moment, the spirit monkey Chang Geng in the distance let out a strange hiss. Zun Kong Shangren raised his eyebrows. He looked at Xiao Hua, then looked at Gongshu Yixin and said with a smile, I'm afraid this old man's beast pet has discovered something. Gongshu girl, come with this old man and the others to take a look. Deference is no substitute for obedience. Gongshu Yixin also felt strange and nodded. At this moment, the spirit monkey Chang Gang was abnormally happy. It stood at the place where Xiao Hua was previously standing and kept somersaulting. Its small mouth squeaked and its tongue kept sticking out of its mouth as if it was making a face. But when Zun Kong Shangren flew closer, Chang Geng suddenly flew into Zun Kong Shangren's hand. It lifted up the sleeve of its daoist robe and hid its head inside, only revealing its red butt. Ha ha! Gongshu Yixin laughed loudly. Gusu Qiu Di also covered her mouth, her face slightly red. You're a killer, Zun Kong Shangren said with a smile. I just gave you credit and you dropped the ball. You really can't show off. Xiao Hua frowned and asked, Brother Zun Kong, Chang Gang seems a bit abnormal. It seems to be excited and scared. Is there a problem with the formation here? It should be. Zun Kong Shangren's face became serious. He nodded and said, this formation looks like the formation spirit that Gongshu girl said. And it's not just one type. There are some that Chang Gang can devour and some that Chang Gang is scared of. The profound pure spirit restriction is now a bit damaged. I'm afraid the evil spirits inside are leaking out. Gongshu Yixin flew to where Chang Gang was and explained, it's also possible that there's only one type of formation spirit. But the formation's leakage is not very uniform. The evil spirits are sometimes strong and sometimes weak, causing Chang Gang to misunderstand. Maybe it's not that simple. Xiao Hua had a bad feeling in his heart. Then, what is Elder Xiao's opinion? Gongshu Yixin said with a smile, weren't you just explaining formation Dao to your disciple? From what I've heard, it's quite standard and methodical. It seems that you also understand the Tao of array formations. Xiao Hua shook his head. This old man knows a bit, but I haven't truly comprehended it. I don't have the experience of learning from the most basic foundation like you. Facing a great formation like the Misty Mountain Maze Formation, this old man can't trace it back to its source. This old man can only break formation with formation. That's brute force. Gongshu Yixin was already standing in the air, criticizing Xiao Hua without holding back. To put it bluntly, it's ruthlessly destroying a flower. This kind of formation breaking method is effective, but if you can't completely break the formation, then you'll have to face the formation's full counterattack. This method isn't very suitable for the Misty Mountain Maze Formation. Then, Gongshu Yixin's 7 apertures began to glow with a faint silver light. This light condensed into her eyes. In just a moment, her eyes flashed with a silver-white halo. This halo was like a full moon, falling towards the Misty Mountain Maze Formation. Zunkong Shangren and the others had already flown over and surrounded Gongshu Yixin. Zhai Xingzi and Zhong Daoran even channeled their Dharma powers and released their divine sense. They slowly scanned the surroundings, wary of any changes in the formation. Fortunately, after the time it took to eat a meal, Gongshu Yixin withdrew the eye-clearing technique. The Great Formation didn't have any special changes, and Gongshu Yixin's face carried a deep smile again. Senior Zun Kong. Gongshu Yixin glanced at Chang Gang, who had been put into Zun Kong's robe, and said, "Your demon pet is really powerful. This one just used the eye-clearing technique to look. This is the most damaged part of the Great Formation. From here, you can see the situation of the Origin Formation and Buddhist Formation. Chang Gang deserves the first merit of this trip." Hehe, that's good. Zun Kong intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Xiao Hua and answered with a smile, "In that case, Miss Gongshu, can you give half of the benefits to my Chang Gang?" Hehe. Gongshu Yixin smiled, her eyes curved like a little fox. It's not too late to wait until Senior's demon pet learns how to break the formation. All right. Zun Kong shrugged. This old man will wait until I get the formation jade slip from Senior Kang Lung's cave and then give it to Chang Gang. Zhong Daoran whispered, "Miss Gongshu, this Cloud Mountain Maze Formation's Origin Formation and Buddhist Formation's Origin Formation, how is it?" Gongshu Yixin withdrew her smile, and her face became solemn. She nodded and said, "Senior Kang Lungzi is really amazing. In addition to the 2 Dao formation mentioned before, which are the few powerful formations I've seen in my life, this Origin Formation and Buddhist Formation are also the great formations that my Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sect have lost." "Oh, if it's a lost great formation, how can misunderstand it?" Xiao Hua frowned and asked curiously, "Hehe, did Senior Xiao forget? This one is a descendant of the Gongshu family. Senior Xiao should know what my Gongshu family is good at, right?" Gongshu Yixin called him Senior Xiao very straightforwardly. Of course, Xiao Hua was also happy to hear it. Senior Xiao touched his nose and said with a smile, "This old man naturally knows. But this old man thinks these are great formations from millions or even tens of millions of years ago. Gongshu family might not be able to preserve them completely." Xiao Hua had read all the Confucian classics of the hidden immortal continent. Now, he was not comparable to when Fu Juan met him. However, he still only knew that the Gongshu family was extremely mysterious. They had a deep accumulation of mechanisms and origin formations. They might not be worse than the Mo family. However, the Gongshu family's reputation on the hidden immortal continent was far inferior to the Mo family. Of course, Xiao Hua wouldn't say this in front of Gongshu Yixin. He only vaguely asked Gongshu Yixin, "Mph. How could Gongshu Yixin not hear Xiao Hua's obscure words?" She snorted and said, "Since the Mo family can preserve the ancient puppet refining method, why can't my Gongshu family preserve the ancient origin formation Dao? This one can reveal that the origin formation that Senior Kang Lungzi used to protect the cave is one of the best preserved ancient origin formations of my Gongshu family." 1. Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "So there's a second and third one?" "I don't know." Gongshu Yixin raised the corner of her mouth and didn't answer. She just pointed and said, This one only knows that this origin formation's name is golden wind and jade dew. Ari, delicate clouds play tricks, flying stars spread hatred, the silver river passes in secret. Golden wind and jade dew meet, it surpasses countless things in the human world. Tender as water, auspicious days like a dream, enduring the magpie bridge to return home. If two people's feelings last long, why would they be together day and night? Hearing the name of the origin formation, Gusu Chodi couldn't help but sigh and recite. When Xiao Hua heard this, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He then said embarrassedly, the Confucian origin formation is really strange. This name is too lingering. Mph, what do you vulgar Daoist sect people know? Gongshu Yixin said with disdain, although Daoist sect formations are powerful, their names are unpleasant to hear. What 9 dragon bone lock, what mysterious yin soul shattering, how can they compare to my Confucian origin formation? The golden wind and jade dew great formation is the lingering feeling of love and longing like a tide. Once one falls into the origin formation, they will wish for death, unable to beg for life. Forget it, forget it. Zun Kong waved his hand, this old man doesn't know anything about golden wind and jade dew. I only know that an old man is pushing a cart. Miss, why don't you tell me how to break this origin formation and what that Buddhist formation is? -13. Chapter 37:16. Bah! Gongshu Yixin spat, her face slightly red, and then said seriously, the other Buddhist formation has also been lost, but fortunately, this one coincidentally found a fragment of a map on a small hill when I was traveling in Nirvana. It was precisely this brilliant glazed golden light Buddhist formation. So this one has a 60% chance of breaking the origin formation and Buddhist formation inside. Brilliant glazed golden light Buddhist formation? Xiao Hua slightly furrowed his brows. One of the Buddhist scriptures of the exquisite temple, Great Treasure Accumulation Sutra, Immeasurable Life Tathagata Society, secretly flowed through his mind. He didn't quite understand the relationship between the Buddhist formation he saw earlier and this Buddhist scripture. What? Senior Xiao also knows Buddhism? Gongshu Yixin was still keenly aware of Xiao Hua's strangeness, and asked with a smile. It's about the same as this one's formation cultivation, Xiao Hua said ambiguously. Senior Xiao is really amazing, you know a lot of things. Gongshu Yixin's words were more sarcastic than admiring. Xiao Hua heard this and smiled bitterly, glancing at Zhai Xingzi. Zhai Xingzi also smiled bitterly. Since Gongshu Yixin came here, she gave Xiao Hua a hard time, obviously because of Gusu Qiu Di. Seeing this, Gusu Qiu Di hurriedly changed the topic and urged, Sister Yixin, since you have already seen through the Misty Mountain Maze formation, do you want to start breaking the formation? Sister Qiu, wait a moment. Gongshu Yixin replied, being able to see through a formation is different from being able to break one. The old monks of the Buddhist sect can see through these 4 maze formations, but if you let them break the formation, I'm afraid even their bones won't be left. This little sister wants to see the big formations trend first, and speculate the big formations changes. Then, Gongshu Yixin clapped her hand, took out a Chenkuan bag, took out a palm-sized formation plate, opened her mouth, and a stream of true qi fell on it. The formation plate produced clouds, and waves of inscriptions flowed out, covering the whole formation plate. Then, Gongshu Yixin waved her hand and the formation plate fell into the formation. Several rays of light appeared and wrapped around the formation plate. After a while, the formation plate disappeared. Next, Gongshu Yixin didn't stop. She placed a total of 81 formation discs within 100 miles of the formation. When the last formation disc was placed inside the formation, Gongshu Yixin's body trembled slightly. A powerless paleness appeared on her pale face. Yixin. Gusu Chodi had been by Gongshu Yixin's side. She hurriedly supported Gongshu Yixin and asked with concern, Are you alright? I'm fine, big sister Qiu. Gongshu Yixin's eyes were filled with fatigue as she whispered, I'll be fine after resting for a while. Then, Gongshu Yixin glanced at Xiao Hua and the others not far away and said indifferently, If little sister doesn't show some real ability, How can they give little sister 30% of the benefits? Then, Gongshu Yishin reached out and took out a jade bottle. She crushed the bottle and a few drops of fragrant liquid fell into her mouth. As the liquid entered her mouth, Gongshu Yishin's face slowly turned red. Seeing Gongshu Yishin casually throw away the jade bottle, Xiao Hua's heart jumped. He waved his hand and the jade bottle flew into his hand. Elder Xiao, what are you doing? Gongshu Yishin raised her hand as if to stop him, but she was still weak. She knew she couldn't compete with Xiao Hua's spiritual power, so she asked indifferently. Xiao Hua didn't answer her. He took the jade bottle and sniffed it. He nodded slightly. Candle core grass, hongyang fruit. Lady Gongshu, this liquid doesn't seem to be an ordinary spirit medicine for strengthening the spirit. Gongshu Yishin's face didn't have any expression. Instead, she showed a trace of coldness and said indifferently, Daoist cultivators are indeed vulgar. Even the liquid I took is my secret. Elder Xiao, don't you know how to respect other people's secrets? Fine. Xiao Hua originally wanted to ask a few more questions. He might be able to help Gongshu Yishin refine some suitable medicinal pills, but Gongshu Yishin clearly had the attitude of keeping people at a distance. Xiao Hua didn't need to ask for a rebuff. Then, Gongshu Yishin flew above the formation and told everyone, including Gusu Qiu Di, to stay far away from her. She sat cross-legged on the high ground and made strange hand seals. As she waved her fingers, streams of noble qi came out of the void. Gongshu Yishin opened her mouth and spat out a few mouthfuls of pure qi. The noble qi turned into inscriptions and landed on the 81 spots of the Great Formation. Wung, wung, wung. As if someone was playing a zither, a pleasant sound came from all over the place. Gorgeous scrolls flew out from various parts of the misty mountain maze and unfurled high up in the sky. Gongshu Yishin's eyes shined with the color of the silver moon. Her face was serious. This scene lasted for a full day and night. When the moon fell and the stars became sparse, all the scrolls gradually disappeared in the cold dew. Okay, elders. Gongshu Yishin's voice was a bit hoarse. I've seen through the misty mountain formation. There's no time to lose. Everyone, listen to me, Sister Yishin. Gusu Qiu Di hurriedly shouted, you've used up a lot of essence. Why don't you rest for a while? No need. Gongshu Yishin smiled, I'm just sending people. I'm not doing it myself. I don't need to rest. Okay. You know what you're doing. Gusu Qiu Di nodded, but there was still some worry in her eyes. Elders, you must have prepared a lot to break the formation. Gongshu Yishin looked at Zhong Daoran and asked. Zhong Daoran nodded, indeed, but Gongshu Yishin didn't wait for Zhong Daoran to finish and interrupted, you don't need to tell me what you've prepared. I'm only responsible for sending people to break the formation. If you're not prepared enough, don't blame me. Then Gongshu Yishin asked, Elder Zun Kong, take your beast pet to the east. When the sun rises, there will be yang qi rising from the east of the formation. You can use a fire-type magic treasure to suppress it. If the formation spirit's qi leaks out, you can let your beast pet devour it. Yes. Master Zun Kong nodded and clapped his hand. It really was a palm-sized stone strip. The stone strip was engraved with countless flame-shaped runes, and the entire stone strip emitted a scarlet red light. This old man's scarlet flamestone can be used. Finished speaking, Venerable Master Zun Kong transformed into a rainbow and headed east. Elder Zhong Daoran. Gongshu Yishin looked at Zhong Daoran again and ordered, if you don't have a beast pet, you can take out a cold-type magic treasure and go to the west of the formation. When the sun rises, there will be yin qi rushing out from the west. You don't need to pay attention to it. When Elder Zun Kong takes out his magic treasure and disturbs the Xianqing spirit forbidding formation, the blue sky underworld formation will be affected. The yin qi will turn back. When the yin qi hasn't completely soaked into the spring water, you can use your magic treasure to lock the yin qi in one fell swoop. As the saying goes, to beat a snake, you have to hit its weak point. This is the formation's weak point. Good. Zhong Daoran's face lit up. I already have a cold-type magic treasure. I've just refined it. It's perfect for today. Elder, please. Gongshu Yixin smiled and raised her hand. Then she looked at Xiao Hua and asked, Elder Xiao, do you have the fire type? Xiao Hua shook his head, I have the metal type, but I know fire type spells. Oh. Elder, you actually have the rare metal type. How rare. But compared to Elder Zhai Xing, your strength is still a bit shallow. Elder Xiao and Elder Zun Kong suppressed the Xianqing spirit forbidding formation together, Gongshu Yixin said and pointed at the North Pole, instructing, Elder Dao Ran, when you seal the blue sky underworld formation, the yin qi will definitely trigger the response of the Xianqing spirit forbidding formation. If Elder Zun Kong is suppressing the dragon's head, then the North Pole is the dragon's tail. As the saying goes, when a dragon swings its tail, mountains and rivers will shatter. It's even more powerful than when a dragon raises its head. I heard that Elder Xiao's cultivation is extremely profound, so I'll entrust this important task to Elder Xiao. When Elder Dao Ran locks on the formation, the Xianqing spirit forbidding formation will shake like a landslide. Elder Xiao, use your natal magic treasure to suppress it. If this natal magic treasure is of the fire type, it's best. If it's of the metal type, it's also fine. What about this? Xiao Hua opened his mouth and the seal of the overturning sea flew out. Layers of yellow shadows floated on it. Earth-type magic treasure? Gongshu Yixin was a bit dazed. She looked at Xiao Hua up and down and asked curiously, Elder Xiao, what kind of element do you have? Of course it's of the metal type. Xiao Hua said with a smile, but I have a lot of magic treasures. This seal of the overturning sea seems to be perfect for suppressing it. This magic treasure is quite powerful. Although its element isn't very suitable, it's not a big problem. Gongshu Yixin nodded and then looked at Zhai Xingzi, Elder Zhai Xing, you have to guard the South Pole, which is the tail of the blue sky underworld formation. You're good at using the power of the stars. The power of the stars has always been violent, so it'll be twice the result with half the effort to deal with the power of ice. However, you don't have to wait for Elder Xiao to make his move. When Elder Dao Ran makes his move, you can make your move as well. Okay. Zhai Xingzi waved his hand and took the falling star in his hand. Then, he followed Xiao Hua and flew in the opposite direction. Seeing the 4 nascent soul cultivators standing in different places, Gongshu Yixin shouted at Fu Jiwen and the others in the distance, go and find suitable seniors according to the attributes of your body or magic treasures. If you need anything, they'll tell you. Yes. Fu Jiwen and the others answered in unison and flew in different directions. Besides Fu Jiwen and Xue Ping, there were 2 other cultivators by Xiao Hua's side. Okay, Elder Sister Qiu, it's your turn now. Gongshu Yixin said with a smile, do you have ice water or an imperial artifact refined with ice water? This. Gusu Qiu Di shook her head slightly, Elder Sister doesn't have such a powerful imperial artifact. Then, does Elder Sister have a Buddhist artifact? Even less so. Oh, then it's a bit troublesome. Gongshu Yixin frowned slightly. -13. Chapter 37:17. Hearing this, Gusu Chodi smiled bitterly. Star Child and the others prepared a lot of things, but who knew that Senior Kang Lung's cave has an essence formation and a Buddhist formation? They wouldn't have prepared imperial or Buddhist artifact. Then, Sister Qiu, ask them if they have frigid water. Gongshu Isin hesitated and said, if they don't, I'll have to think of another way. Gusu Chodi hurriedly transmitted her voice, but obviously, no one had frigid water. Just as Gongshu Isin was about to think hard, she suddenly smiled and whispered, Sister Qiu, you're mistaken. Frigid water is what we call Confucian cultivators. Taoism calls it innate heavy water. He, indeed. Gusu Chodi also smiled and transmitted her voice again. But after a while, Gusu Chodi's face showed a strange expression and said, they don't have innate heavy water either. But your senior Xiao has innate primordial water, is it useful? Of course. Gongshu Isin raised her eyebrows, innate primordial water is more effective than innate heavy water. Saying this, Gongshu Isin took out an imperial artifact that looked like a copper cup and gave it to Gusu Chodi. She then told Gusu Chodi the inscriptions to activate the imperial artifact and urged her to get 3 drops of innate primordial water. When Gusu Chodi returned, Gongshuisin said, "Sister Chio, when the 4 nascent soul cultivators suppress the Shenqing spirit forbidding formation and blue sky underworld formation, the golden wind jade dew essence formation and bright glazed golden light Buddha formation will explode at the same time. At this time, you and I must do our best to not let the noble chi of the essence formation and the Buddha light of the Buddha formation collide." Senior Kang Langzi set up these 2 formations in the inner layer, which are completely different from the Daoist formations, so that when the immortals and Buddhas collide, the primal chi of the universe will be stimulated. When the power of the 3 formations collides, everything will be wiped out. Hiss. Gusu Chodi took in a cold breath and was a bit uncertain. She whispered, "We're only at the 5th level of essence chi. Can we break this ancient forbidden formation? Humans die for wealth, birds die for food." Gongshu Yixin didn't answer. She only said a few words. She raised her head and looked at the clouds in the east. She reached out and took out a strange imperial weapon. This imperial equipment was 3 inches long and looked like a small ladder. It also looked like a square fence and was engraved with densely packed armor inscriptions. When Gusu Chodi heard this, she felt helpless. Everyone knew how powerful this misty mountain maze formation was. However, for tens of thousands of years, didn't many cultivators try their best to find this formation? Now that they were already in front of the door, how could they stop? Gongshu Yixin took a few deep breaths. Faint clouds surged around her body. Wisps of noble chi swarmed over. Gongshu Yixin opened her mouth and breathed true chi into the imperial treasure. The imperial treasure gradually expanded. "Little sister will go first." Gongshu Yixin flew to the north and stopped about 10 miles away from Gusu Chodi. Gusu Chodi also flew towards the south, stopping after flying for a full 10 miles. She then raised her hand and activated her Zhen Qi. The copper cup glowed with a bronze radiance, and the 3 drops of Xiantian true water began to revolve slowly in the radiance like a bright full moon. Swoosh! Seeing that dawn had broken in the east and a ray of sunlight pierced the vault of heaven, Zun Kong had already released his divine sense to envelop an area of several dozen kilometers around him. Sure enough, under the sunlight, the side of the mountain that previously didn't have the slightest trace of magic power fluctuation suddenly soared up a blazing aura. This aura made a hissing sound in the air. This chi was different from normal Dharma power. It only had a yang chi like the rising of the sun and the setting of the moon. If Gongshu Yixin didn't warn him, Zun Kong Shangren wouldn't have cared. Gigi. The spirit monkey Chang Geng showed a fearful expression. It flipped in the air again, trying to dodge. Seeing this, Zun Kong Shangren didn't dare to be careless. He waved his hand and the scarlet flame stone flew into the air. Under the golden sunlight, the scarlet flame stone emitted a strong flame. Go! As Zun Kong Shangren formed a seal, a wave of Dharma power rushed into the scarlet flame stone. Whoosh! The scarlet flame stone's flame instantly grew stronger. Hundreds of heaven and earth origin chi turned into a hurricane and rushed into the flame. Now is the time! Zun Kong Shangren narrowed his eyes. He watched the chi rush straight into the sky. It seemed to be attracted by the scarlet flamestone's chi and actually changed direction. Zun Kong Shangren's heart tightened and he slapped the top of his head. Wang! A chi appeared out of nowhere. The chi condensed into a pillar and landed on the scarlet flamestone. Boom! Like fireworks, a large hand rushed out of the scarlet flamestone. It was completely formed by flames and instantly covered the surrounding several hundred feet. Roar! A hoarse roar came from the air. The chi that rushed out earlier seemed to sense something was wrong. It let out a roar and immediately fell. However, this chi only fell a few feet before Zun Kong Shangren's flaming hand fell and caught this chi in its hand. As for Chang Geng, who was next to Venerable Master Zun Kong, the hair on his body stood up, and his tail was as straight as a stick. His eyes shone brightly as he charged toward the hand, ready to take advantage of the situation. Rumble. Suddenly, the sound of thunder rang out above the oval-shaped formation. It was like a clap of thunder on a sunny day. The entire space began to tremble. Immediately afterwards, a powerful whirlwind appeared below Master Zun Kong. Sand and pebbles immediately flew up from the mountain. Just as the whirlwind appeared, Zhong Daoran's body suddenly gave off a strange coldness. Then thousands of needle-like coldness appeared and surged toward Zhong Daoran. Zhong Daoran originally had an ice body, so he wasn't afraid of the cold. However, this coldness was clearly abnormal. Even with Zhong Daoran's ability, he couldn't help but shiver. He quickly raised his hand and a strange magic treasure appeared in his hand. This magic treasure was dark green and seemed to be in the shape of a beast. However, its head was missing, and only 3 of its 4 hooves were intact. A green light flashed on Zhong Daoran's face, and the magic treasure suddenly expanded. The shadow of a monster emerged from the magic treasure, and the moment it appeared, it immediately blocked the cold. At this moment, waves of crashing sounds came from under Zhong Daoran. A dark purple aura that could be seen with the naked eye rushed out from the formation toward Zhong Daoran. The aura's power was extremely strong. Even someone as strong as Zhong Daoran was shocked. He involuntarily activated his magic power and had to first take out a magic treasure to block it. Just as the magic treasure glowed, Xiao Hua's voice came, "Brother Daoran, don't be impatient." Sigh. Zhong Daoran took a deep breath and shivered. He quickly retreated. Gongshu Isin had clearly said not to block the yin aura when it first appeared. Although Gongshu Isin didn't explain, the yin aura was very clear. This yin aura was the power of the formation. Zhong Daoran's cultivation couldn't block it. He should avoid it and wait for the yin aura to return before attacking it. Who knew that Zhong Daoran actually lost his sense of propriety in the formation? If it wasn't that Zhong Daoran's Dao heart wasn't complete, then the formation had the power to bewitch him. Fortunately, Xiao Hua reminded him in time. Zhong Daoran suddenly realized. Sure enough, the extremely cold aura rushed into the sky. Layers of ice fell in the nearby space. When the yin aura reached a height of 1,000 feet, it suddenly rolled down like a waterfall and fell straight back into the formation. Zhong Daoran didn't dare to be careless. He released his divine sense. A cold aura that seemed to be able to freeze divine sense spread toward Zhong Daoran's Niwen palace. Zhong Daoran was shocked. He hurriedly urged his Yuanying. The Yuanying stretched out its hand and a dark green object like a water droplet flew out from its body. It was the ghost gallbladder Zhong Daoran just obtained from the Jade Pavilion gathering. The Yuanying opened its mouth and spat a mouthful of golden blood on it. Wung wung. The ghost gallbladder vibrated. A layer of ink-like liquid seeped into the Yuanying's hand. The Yuanying's hands formed a seal. A wave of extreme yin aura came out of Zhong Daoran's body. Zhong Daoran hadn't completely refined this ghost gallbladder. When this aura came out, a layer of ice appeared around Zhong Daoran's body. However, this cold aura blocked the invasion of divine sense. Zhong Daoran was slightly absent-minded. The yin aura had already fallen a lot. Zhong Daoran lamented the strangeness of this formation. He hurriedly slapped his hand. A pure green light flew out from the top of his head and landed on the magic treasure in midair. The magic treasure was like the finishing touch of a dragon as it gave birth to a magnificent multicolored light. Although there wasn't any roar, it still bravely rushed toward the yin aura. Catcher! A strange sound came from the formation. Then, gurgle. The sound of a fountain gushing out from the large formation within a radius of 100 miles. Rumble. Just as the strange sound appeared, a series of earth-shaking movements came from the entire formation again. In the far east, Master Zun Kong, together with the Red Flamestone and Monkey Changeng, was lifted up to a height of 1,000 feet. Several Taoist disciples who were preparing to help at the side were also lifted up. They couldn't maintain their balance at all. Below them, hundreds of ridges swelled up and flew into the air. The gravel fell down like rain. At the same time, Zhong Daoran was also lifted up to a height of 1,000 feet. The river that shuttled through the formation also boiled. A destructive aura of yin and yang instantly filled the space of a few hundred miles. Woo-woo. As the heaven and earth rumbled, a powerful earthy yellow light beam rushed out from the North Pole where Xiao Hua was. Inside the light beam, the seal of overturning the sea, which was as big as a mountain, produced thousands of pearls. Under the urging of the coiling dragon, it produced a powerful confining force that landed on a corner of the formation. Boom! The entire sky surged with a wave of air again. As the seal of overturning the sea fell, its suppressive force spread toward the far east along the ridges above the formation. The ridges that had already flown into the air were now twisting extremely, but they still slowly fell down. At the connection of these ridges, thousands of gaps were revealed. They were the traces of the Xianqing spirit forbidding formation being damaged by the erosion of time. -13. Chapter 37:18. As soon as Xiao Hua moved, Zhai Xingzi didn't dare to stay still. Seeing the hundreds of water lights and ice shards rushing towards him from all directions, Zhai Xingzi's body started to glow with starlight. His entire body gradually became blurry. Woo-woo. Similarly, the natural yuan qi descended from the sky like a hurricane and landed within the starlight. Immediately after, another ray of light flew out from Zhai Xingzi's hand. That falling star was activated by Zhai Xingzi. The several zhong-long starlight soared into the sky and directly pierced into the water lights. It emitted a sizzling sound. Xiao Hua had already released a trace of his divine sense. He was constantly paying attention to Zhai Xingzi's movements. Although Zhai Xingzi's magic treasure released starlight, he was still activating the qi of heaven and earth. Xiao Hua wasn't disappointed. He knew that Zhai Xingzi was using the power of the stars. However, this power of the stars was condensed from a magic treasure. It couldn't be considered the real power of the stars. However, even if that was the case, Zhai Xingzi's skills were still powerful. Zhai Xingzi's body was like a bright star that shone rapidly and resonated with the falling star. A desolate qi came out from the falling star and pressed down on the formation along with the starlight. Rumble. Huge tremors appeared continuously and suppressed the space around Zhai Xingzi, who was thousands of feet away from him. Zunkong Shangren, Zhong Daoran, Xiao Hua, and Zhai Xingzi were respectively at the east, west, north, and south of the misty mountain maze. They used their divine powers to suppress the Xianqing spirit forbidding formation and the blue sky underworld formation. It was as if four giant hands were pressing down on the four corners of the formation. Even if the formation spirit and the qi of yin and yang were stirring crazily, they still couldn't break free from this suppression. However, when the suppression above the four corners landed in the center of the formation like waves, puff puff, a sound like a fountain suddenly appeared. Right between Gusu Chodi and Gongshu Isin, a crack appeared in the formation. It was as if a huge eye was slowly opening. This eye was flowing with two colors. One was a clear green qi. Inside it, billions of inscriptions flowed like tadpoles. The other was a golden Buddhist light. Inside it, layers of golden inscriptions were like a Buddha or a heavenly dragon, stirring up thousands of Buddhist chants. As the huge crack split open, the two colors began to rush madly towards each other. An indescribably terrifying aura was born along with the noble spirit in the void, as well as the power of thought that came out of nowhere. Hiss. Xiao Hua's divine sense sensed this, and he couldn't help but take a deep breath. He secretly said, "Sure enough, it's a great array carefully arranged by a great array master." If the great array was in good condition, not to mention 4 late nascent soul stage cultivators, even 4 late spirit severing stage cultivators wouldn't dare to break the array. I really don't know what other tricks this Gongshu Isin has. Just as Xiao Hua was thinking, he heard a clear sound coming from Gongshu Isin's location. It was like the cry of a phoenix or the cry of a bird. 3-colored qi rushed into the air and condensed into a Z. That somewhat graceful Z grabbed with its hand. Gongshu Isin's ladder-like imperial equipment fell into the air. Rumble rumble, countless ant-like inscriptions fell from the imperial equipment and fell into the formation called Golden Wind and Jade Dew. These inscriptions were very strange. As they fell, they expanded. Not only did they devour the inscriptions inside the formation, they also stole the noble qi from the void. Moreover, these inscriptions formed poems and articles, falling into the formation. As the number of poems increased, the formation was no longer able to drown them out. Every inscriptions that came into contact with these poems were assimilated, turning into words and sentences of the poems. What was special was that the poems and articles formed by these inscriptions condensed extremely quickly. The poems condensed into articles, and the articles condensed into scrolls. Hundreds, thousands of scrolls formed a mountain of literature, suppressing the golden wind and jade dew formation, not allowing the formation to disperse at all. What was special was that the scrolls under the mountain of literature fell one by one, forming a dragon-like book city, separating the inscriptions of the formation from the Buddhist light of the formation. While Gongshu Isin was controlling the imperial equipment to block the formation, Gusu Chodi was not slow either. The imperial equipment that looked like a copper cup tilted slightly, and a stream of green water poured out of the cup, rushing into the Buddhist formation like the Milky Way. The golden inscriptions in the Buddhist formation gave off Buddhist light. This Buddhist light was crystal clear, and every inch of it had a glass Buddha hidden inside. However, when the green water fell and the Buddhist light pierced into it, there was no reflection or penetration. It was as if the light had disappeared. When the thousands of chants fell into the green water formed by the primordial water, they also disappeared into the countless small chiliocosms inside the primordial water. The book mountain expanded rapidly, blocking the light of the primordial formation like an iron wall. The blue water surged like a transparent barrier, blocking the light of the Buddha formation. For a moment, the crack actually stopped there, and the rumbling of the entire formation started to weaken. Incredible, incredible. Even someone as strong as Xiao Hua was astonished when he saw the great array begin to slow down. This great array could even block a 7th grade essence energy cultivator in the past, but now it has actually declined to this extent. Can a few 5th grade essence energy cultivators like us suppress it? No, I'm afraid it's not that simple. Xiao Hua saw that things were going so smoothly, far exceeding what was recorded in the Jade Eyes. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Xiao Hua did not know about other people's divine abilities, but he himself had thought about it for a long time. Some divine abilities that were not afraid of being seen through were supposed to be used here, but just one seal of turning sea suppressed the gate-guarding formation that was close to a tribulation-passing expert's strength. Wasn't this too much of a tribulation-passing expert? Sure enough, just as Xiao Hua's doubts arose, it was like a wave rising and falling. Just now it was a wave trough, but now the formation's power suddenly rose, and a huge wave rushed up. Whether it was Xiao Hua and the other Dao cultivators, or Gusu Chodi and Gongshu Isin, a huge force appeared under them at the same time, pouncing towards them. Wang wang. The seal of turning sea roared loudly, and countless phantoms pounced on the formation one after another. Powerful ripples in the void were actually struck out by these phantoms. Although this seal of turning sea had not been completely refined by green-robed Xiao Hua, the aura of a spiritual weapon had already taken shape. All of you, quickly retreat. Although the seal of overturning sea had suppressed a corner of the grand formation, Xiao Hua was alarmed and had a bad feeling. He hurriedly shouted at Fu Jiwen and the others, "Come back after this grand formation is broken." Yes, disciple understands. Fu Jiwen, Shui Ping, and the others did not dare to be negligent. They urged their figures to fly far away. Zun Kong and the others also saw the figures of the other disciples hurriedly escaping. This formation was indeed not something they could participate in with their cultivation. Moreover, Xiao Hua's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. The power of his spiritual weapon was powerful, and it suppressed the north pole of the formation in an instant. Then, the cultivators of the other 3 poles of the formation would not be able to withstand it. Boom boom boom. 3 loud sounds, like the growls and roars of ferocious beasts, were heard. The counterattack of the formation pounced on Zun Kong. It was so powerful that it caused the faces of the 3 late nascent soul cultivators to change. Zun Kong and Xiao Hua worked together to suppress the profound purity spirit forbidding formation. His counterattack was the most powerful. The hundreds of mountain ridges seemed to have come alive at this moment. They broke free from the formation and crazily extended from Xiao Hua's location to Zun Kong. Daoist Master Xiao, you are testing me. Zun Kong bitterly smiled and slapped the top of his head with his hand. Poof! A 6-feet-long baby flew out with a snake-like whip in his hand. This baby was wearing exquisite spiritual armor. As soon as it appeared in midair, it immediately opened its mouth. Woo! A huge wind column was born in midair. Several spiraling flows of vital chi of heaven and earth descended from the sky, forming a huge hole and falling into the nascent soul's mouth. Wung wung. Wind flowers flashed around the nascent soul's body. The nascent soul's entire body seemed to be inflated with air. In a moment, it was 1,000 feet tall. Poof! Zun Kong's nascent soul Dharma body had just formed. He pointed his finger, and the crimson flame rock that was originally floating in midair immediately turned into a ball of flame. Countless fire rings flew out from the flame and enveloped an area of several miles. Go! A huge roar came from the nascent soul's mouth. The nascent soul raised its hand again, and the snake-like whip turned into a whirlwind that wrapped around its hand. Soon after, the hand grabbed the flame. The flame borrowed the wind's power and made an even more powerful sound. Tiny thunderclaps came from the void. Strands of hair-like crystal threads rushed into the flame. The flame condensed into 100 feet in size. Outside the flame, there was a layer of faint green wind flow. Fall. This sound seemed to explode from the nascent soul's body. Strands of chi waves rushed in all directions along with this sound. The flaming rock fell with a loud bang. Layers of fire flowed along the roaring mountain ridges in all directions and instantly dyed one side of the formation red. Ao ao. Hundreds of tiny cries came from the mountain ridges. The mountain ridges trembled rapidly and then calmed down. Xiao Hua's first move forced Zun Kong to have no choice but to use his nascent soul Dharma body. Zhong Daoran and Zhai Xingzi, who were in charge of suppressing the blue sky underworld formation, clapped their hands at the same time and released their nascent souls. Their nascent souls also solidified and turned into Dharma idols that were 100 feet in size. However, Zhai Xingzi's body flashed with strands of nebula. On the other side of the nebula were the star marks that were deeply imprinted on the skin of the nascent soul. Looking at Zhong Daoran's nascent soul, although there were some faint talisman scripts around it, these talisman scripts were gradually disappearing. The origin energy of heaven and earth swarmed around the nascent soul's body and not the talisman scripts. Wung wung. Zhai Xingzi and Zhong Daoran activated their nascent soul Dharma bodies almost at the same time. The difference was that Zhai Xingzi's nascent soul's 7 orifices produced a suction force. 7 dragon-like whirlwinds whizzed into the Dharma body. On the other hand, Zhong Daoran's nascent soul opened the top of his head. The origin energy of heaven and earth poured in like a waterfall. For a moment, within a radius of 1,000 miles, wind and clouds surged and the weather changed greatly. -13. Chapter 37:19. Ha, ha! Zhong Daoran and Zhai Xingzi's nascent soul avatars roared at the same time. Zhai Xingzi's falling stars turned into 7 dazzling stars, and Zhai Xingzi's nascent soul avatars were in the center of the 7 stars. The 7 stars fell along with the giant hand. Boom! The earth shook, and the spring water flowed backward. The yin qi that just rose up was immediately suppressed. However, when Zhai Xingzi's main body was shaking, his eyes flashed with a very puzzled expression. Zhai Xingzi muttered to himself, "Strange, this place seems a bit strange. Why does it make me feel like this?" Seeing that Zhai Xingzi had succeeded, Zhong Daoran did not dare to be negligent. The nascent soul's hand grabbed the magic treasure, and the magic treasure descended at lightning speed. Roar! The magic treasure seemed to have come alive under the control of the nascent soul. The strange beast raised its slightly damaged head and raised its 3 hooves. A strange aura pressed down. For every 10 feet it descended, the condensed ice shards would drop by 10 feet. When the huge beast and the nascent soul's hand landed, the yin energy and the jade current that had surged previously charged towards the center from both ends. Boom! After the collision, everything immediately calmed down. Although there were still small ripples flowing back and forth, Regardless of whether it was the mysterious Pure Spirit Forbidding Formation or the Yellow Springs Formation, the damaged areas became increasingly damaged. Waves of inexplicable fluctuations surged out from those areas. The yang energy and yin energy that surged out formed thousands of air explosions in the sky above the formation. However, these air explosions were like small firecrackers in front of the three nascent soul avatars. They couldn't do much. The outside of the formation was very dangerous. Inside the formation, the Golden Wind Jade Dew Origin Formation was suppressed by Gongshu Yixin's imperial weapon. There was no resistance at all. The brilliant glazed golden light Buddha formation resisted a little, but it didn't cause any big waves under the imperial weapon's copper cup and the innate true water. Seeing this, Gongshu Yixin's face bloomed with a flower-like smile. Hihi, if we're talking about spells, the Daoist cultivators are more powerful. These 4 cultivators are only at the upper 4th level, but they can suppress the outer layer of the Misty Mountain Maze formation. This really surprised me. Big Sister Qiu, your Zhai Xingzi is much stronger than that Zun Kong Shangren. Although Gusu Qiu Di was not proficient in the art of formations, her cultivation was stronger than Gongshu Yixin's. It was easy for her to control the copper cup to defend against the Buddhist sect. Seeing that Zhai Xingzi was fine, she was relieved. Hearing Gongshu Yixin's words, the corner of her mouth curled up. She used her chin to point at Xiao Hua's direction and teased, Xingzi is considered powerful, but compared to that person, he is still lacking a lot. Look, he didn't even release his nascent soul, yet he forced Zun Kong and the others to utilize their nascent soul spirit bodies. He is the most formidable. So what if he's powerful? Gongshu Yixin lazily replied, when little sister thinks that he's nearly 2,000 years old, my heart feels sick and nauseous. Sister Qiu, please don't mention it again. Gusu Chodi opened her mouth and wanted to say something. But at this moment, a faint trace of black gas suddenly appeared between the Essence Formation and Buddha Formation. The black gas was filled with tiny devils, and a bloody stench instantly filled the entire formation. Devil Qi? Gusu Chodi frowned. She didn't understand why there was devil Qi here. She looked at Gongshu Yixin, who was also shocked. She stared blankly at the devil Qi floating out, unable to react for a moment. She also didn't understand the use of devil Qi appearing in White Cloud Mountain's maze formation, but in just a moment, Gongshu Yixin's expression suddenly changed, as if she thought of something. But she didn't have time to explain to Gusu Chodi. She shouted, Sister Qiu, 5 Qi unifications, exterminate the devil Qi. Okay. When Gusu Chodi heard this, her expression changed slightly. Without hesitation, she slapped her hand on the top of her head and tricolored Qi surged out. Her entire body reached out and the tricolored Qi immediately turned into a ball of Qi that was dozens of feet large. Opposite her, Gongshu Yixin also activated an extremely pure 2-colored true Qi. The true Qi turned into 2 giant dragons, rushing towards the devil Qi. Whether it was the Qi ball or the Qi dragon, they both let out a powerful roar. In the midst of the roar, the void cracked, the mighty Qi pillar suddenly arrived, killing the thin devil Qi. But Gusu Chodi and Gongshu Yixin were fast, but they still couldn't be faster than the mighty Qi of the Essence Formation and Buddha Light of the Buddha Formation. As the devil Qi appeared, the first to surge was the Essence Formation that was suppressed by Gongshu Yixin's imperial artifact. The inscriptions under the Wen Mountain seemed to have seen an irreconcilable enemy. They all emitted a strong light. This light instantly drowned the Wen Mountain, rushing towards the Book City. And between the devil Qi and the Essence Formation, there was also a mighty Qi pillar that broke through the void, attacking the devil Qi. This mighty Qi pillar was indeed rushing towards the devil Qi, but still, the mighty Qi pillar closest to the Essence Formation turned to attack the Book City and the Wen Mountain. The mighty Qi pillar was so mighty, and it was also the pure power of heaven and earth. How could Gongshu Yixin's imperial artifact block it? Under the pincer attack, in just a moment, the inscriptions on Gongshu Yixin's imperial artifact exploded one by one. Waves of mighty turbulence flew above the Essence Formation. In the turbulence, the Wen Mountain and Book City suddenly collapsed. The scrolls mixed with the writings flew all over the sky, and when these writings flew into the air, they involuntarily rushed towards the devil Qi. The ladder-like imperial artifact flashed with multicolored light. Not only did it not restrain the crazy inscriptions, it even assisted the essence formation in attacking the devil chi. With Gongshu Yi Xin's current cultivation level, she couldn't control the imperial artifact at all. Take drastic measures. Gongshu Yi Xin's face was pale, her arrogant head slightly lowered, her bright eyes looking at the monstrous inscriptions and mighty chi waves. She whispered in a low voice. She knew better than anyone that Kang Langzi, who set up the essence formation, had already predicted her plan to break the formation. I really underestimated Senior Kang Langzi. Now that things have come to this, I'm afraid we have to use that thing. Gongshu Yi Xin couldn't control the imperial artifact. Gusu Chodi also panicked, but Gusu Chodi's subbody used the three chis converging to help Gongshu Yi Xin's two-colored true chi destroy the devil chi, but the devil chi was used by Kang Langzi to set up the formation. How could it be so easily defeated? The two's true chi destroyed a lot of the devil chi, but the devil chi was even more rampant, attacking the innate primordial water under Gusu Chodi's copper cup. Gusu Chodi's innate primordial water was powerful, but it couldn't block all of the devil chi. When the devil chi was created, the Buddha light of the glazed golden light Buddha formation shone brightly, and countless Buddhas, heavenly flowers, and heavenly dragons rushed out from the Buddha light, roaring and roaring as they rushed towards the innate primordial water. Gusu Chodi's subbody was huge, so was the imperial artifact's copper cup. Unfortunately, Gusu Chodi relied on the imperial artifact to control the innate primordial water. She couldn't truly unleash the power of the primordial water, and even Gusu Chodi herself didn't dare to look directly at the primordial water. Now, under the pincer attack of the devil chi and the Buddha light, the primordial water had already revealed a flaw. As soon as the flaw was exposed, it was immediately invaded by the demonic chi. Sizzle. Countless sounds rang out in the void. Some were miserable cries, some were the mixing of blood and fire, and some were the roars of anger. All kinds of strange sounds came from the innate primordial water. The demonic chi actually started a battle with the Buddhist light in the mini Kiliakasm. One battlefield after another, lives were born and extinguished in the battle between the Buddha and the demonic chi. This had long surpassed Gusu Chodi's expectations. Amitabha Buddha. In the glazed golden light Buddha formation, an unknown Buddha chant came out, and a huge Buddha statue came out from the Buddha light. This Buddha statue was in the shape of 1,000 hands, and each hand held a Buddha weapon. In the center of each hand, there was a Buddha eye, and these Buddha hands executed techniques to subdue the devil, attacking the devil chi through the flaws. Gusu Chodi's face turned pale, and she also realized that when she used the innate primordial water to suppress the glazed golden light Buddha formation, the Buddha formation did not show much power. After all, the Buddha formation was the same as the cultivation of the Buddha sect, which emphasized tolerance. But now, with the appearance of the devil chi, the mercy of the Buddha formation mixed with the thunderbolts had already exceeded the limit of her control, and the innate primordial water had already started to crumble under the pincer attack of the devil chi. This was still not the most important thing. What made Gusu Chodi and Gongshu Isin tremble with fear the most was that the overwhelming wave of energy and the blazing glazed golden light unavoidably came into contact with the devil energy. Waves of terrifying aura were produced between the two. Strings of bubbles disappeared into the void where the two were sent out. Moreover, the sounds of huge explosions that seemed to resound in their hearts caused the void to collapse. The two's true chi shook uncontrollably. Even their previously awe-inspiring subbodies began to tremble from the inside out. Not good. In an instant, Gusu Chodi and Gongshu Isin thought of the strange phenomenon recorded in the jade eyes that Xueping found. Wasn't the scene of the tragic attack on the misty mountain maze formation like this? Go! Gongshu Isin immediately had the thought of escaping, and she looked up at Gusu Chodi. That Gusu Chodi also had fear in her eyes, and her Zhenqi started to shrink. However, at this moment, boom, boom, boom. The situation of the misty mountain maze formation going out of control had already spread to the outer formation, and the two formations that were suppressed by Xiao Hua and the others just now started to counterattack even more crazily. But looking at the Shenqing spirit-restricting formation, the hundreds of ridges that were hundreds of miles long were now completely floating in the air, and huge rocks were shaking off from the ridges, and the flames that spread for dozens of miles were also extinguished under the trembling. Under the ridges, roar, roar. The souls that were imprisoned by the formation let out valiant and unyielding, and even angry roars. They were released by the formation, and Zun Kong's nascent soul Dharma body and red flamestone started to tremble under the counterattack of these souls, and patches of golden light were shaved off from the nascent soul Dharma body. Run. Zun Kong instantly had the same thought as Gongshu Isin when he faced the uncontrollable souls, and only one thought appeared in his mind. -13. Chapter 37:20. However, Master Zun Kong's nascent soul only moved a few inches before a huge force lifted him and the red flamestone several feet away. This force forced Master Zun Kong to give up. However, at this moment, Venerable Master Zun Kong's nascent soul raised his head and scanned the formation with his divine sense. The entire formation was a mess, and his divine sense was cut off by the formation. Venerable Master Zun Kong couldn't see the situation of the others clearly. However, he knew that if he stayed here and fought, it might be a dead end, but if he escaped, it would be a dead end. He didn't believe that without his suppression, Xiao Hua could resist the backlash of the hundreds of souls in the profound purity forbidden spirit formation. Maybe I'll die. If it was before the Jade Pavilion conference, Master Zun Kong wouldn't have cared about the life and death of others. However, after years of life and death together and the trust between them, he understood the importance of trust. Maybe I'll escape. I don't have many choices, but for that heavy trust, I have no other choice. Even if I die here today, I have to face Brother Dao Ran and Daoist Xiao, who exposed their backs to me. Forget it, then. I'll die. Thinking about this, esteemed Master Zun Kong looked at the rapidly shrinking nascent soul that was about to enter his body. He clenched his teeth and formed a seal with both hands. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. This blood essence was crimson. When the seal landed on the blood essence emitted layers of golden light. Layers of strange fluctuations appeared in the void and landed on the blood essence. Thunderous rumbles echoed in the void and soon, the blood essence was refined into a blood-red rune. Go. Master Zun Kong waved his hand and the rune turned into a stream of light that landed between the nascent soul's eyebrows. Then, Master Zun Kong closed his eyes. Break. His divine sense rushed into the nascent soul's eyebrows like a tide. Boom. A light sound came from between the nascent soul's eyebrows. As the rune landed, his divine sense also poured in and a strange rune appeared out of thin air. It was at this moment that Master Zun Kong cut off his connection with the nascent soul. The avatar left in the nascent soul's body let out a miserable scream. Hiss. Even Master Zun Kong sucked in a breath of cold air. A heart-wrenching pain came from his Niwen palace. This pain seemed to be unbearable. However, Master Zun Kong didn't have time to comprehend this out-of-body feeling. He clenched his teeth and formed a seal with his hands again. His entire body rapidly expanded under the influence of the seal. Roar. Seeing Zun Kong like this, the spirit monkey Chang Gang also roared at the sky. Not only did all the hair on its palm-sized body stand up, it also flashed with demonic aura and its body began to uncontrollably expand. As Zun Kong's body expanded, his nascent soul slowly shrank. It was at this moment that Zun Kong's crimson flame stone began to crack under the attacks of the hundreds of souls. Flames shot into the sky, followed by hundreds of primordial souls. Each of them bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced toward Zun Kong. Woo woo. A huge pillar of primal chi of heaven and earth descended from the sky and landed on Zun Kong's body and nascent soul. The two spirit bodies of the same size opened their eyes at the same time. Clear light flashed in their eyes and they were filled with indifference. Roar! The spirit monkey Chang'an transformed into a demon body that was hundreds of feet tall and flew into the air. He landed in front of the two spirits. Break! The two souls of Master Zun Kong sneered at the same time. They each reached out a hand and placed it on the spirit monkey's shoulders. Boom! Spirit monkey Chang Geng's eyes emitted light pillars that were several dozen feet in size. The two light pillars created a powerful suction force. The souls of the ferocious spirits that had already attacked Master Zun Kong were first afraid, then they became even more ferocious. They recklessly charged at Master Zun Kong's nascent soul as if that soul was their innate delicacy. The two light pillars were like a huge whirlpool. Every time they swept across a type of evil spirit, the evil spirit's soul would be firmly sucked in. A large number of evil spirits fell into Chang Geng's light pillars, and Chang Geng's body involuntarily expanded. However, whether it was Master Zun Kong's body or nascent soul, the large hand on Chang Geng's body also shone brightly. The souls were sucked into the two souls, reducing the pressure on Chang Geng. However, how powerful were the ancient ferocious spirits? How could the spirit monkey Chang Geng resist them? In just a few seconds, Chang Geng's face was filled with pain. His huge demon body began to swell. Even Master Zun Kong's body and nascent soul began to uncontrollably expand. The light around them rapidly trembled. Fight! Esteemed Zun Kong's face was already as white as a sheet of paper, but he let out an angry roar and took out a broken piece of jade. He opened his mouth and spat out another mouthful of essence blood. The jade expanded and turned into a palm-sized monster. This jade was actually a rare jade talisman. Shua. This jade talisman was different from Xiao Hua's phoenix illusion. As Master Zun Kong pointed his finger, the jade talisman fell between the nascent soul's eyebrows, which was where the strange rune disappeared. Roar! Master Zun Kong's nascent soul trembled in pain, then light overflowed. As the world's origin energy crazily rushed in, the entire soul turned into the monster's shape. Woo! The monster opened its mouth and spat out a green light. Several ferocious spirits near Master Zun Kong were immediately covered and turned into streams of light that entered the monster's body. However, when the ferocious spirits entered the monster's body, the nascent soul monster's body expanded, and expanded again. Master Zun Kong's eyes flashed with desperation. Even the large hand on Chang Geng's body increased the suction force. Chang Geng's body also expanded. Ancient ferocious spirits. Even if Master Zun Kong activated the Jade Talisman and paid with his life, with his late-stage nascent soul cultivation, he might be able to devour one or two. However, there were hundreds of ferocious spirits in front of him. How many could he devour? The Misty Mountain Maze Formation, even if it only had 30% of its power, was definitely not something a nascent soul cultivator could covet. Perhaps in less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Master Zun Kong would be swollen by the ancient ferocious beast's soul. No regrets. At this moment, Master Zun Kong's heart was filled with satisfaction. There was nothing more satisfying than this moment. That confidence that was worthy of the trust made him generously go to his death. At this critical moment, Wang, 800 miles away, a strange phenomenon suddenly appeared. Master Zun Kong was forced to release his nascent soul and even forced to activate a secret technique to enter the out-of-body realm. How good would Zhai Xingzi and Zhong Daoran be? Although the Blue Sky Underworld formation was different from the Shenqing Spirit Forbidding Array, its power matched the Shenqing Spirit Forbidding Array. When the ferocious beast soul of the Shenqing Spirit Forbidding Array broke out, the Blue Sky Underworld formation naturally had a corresponding chain. When the fierce souls attacked Venerable Zun Kong, the blue water hidden in the formation also poured out. Waves of blood-red light flashed and a bloody aura that would make one's blood boil rushed out of the formation. Among this aura, a strand of blood-red nether water that was smaller than a thumb rushed into the air along with a strand of blue water that was more than 100 feet thick. This. Zhong Daoran and his nascent soul Dharma body's 4 eyes flashed with disbelief. Zhong Daoran's main body almost cried out, "This is the yellow spring water?" Yes, wasn't that blood-red water the extremely rare yellow spring water in the hidden immortal continent? Countless runes flashed in the green water. The runes were not only used to set up the formation, but also to confine the yellow spring water. Gongshu Isin said that the green water's power was not as powerful as before. The truth was that the core of the Blue Sky Underworld formation was inside the formation. All the yin qi and water that appeared outside the formation was just a cover to hide the ferocious teeth of the blue sky underworld formation. At that moment, Zhong Daoran used a Dharma treasure to suppress the yin qi within the formation. However, when the yin qi receded, the water of the yellow springs surged again. The runes in the water of the yellow springs peeled off layer by layer. The blood-red water of the yellow springs quickly dyed the water red. The huge water flow was like a blood dragon rushing through the formation and pouncing towards Zhong Daoran. If it was Zhong Daoran before the Yaotai conference, he might not be able to recognize the yellow spring water, or he might not be so afraid of it. However, Zhong Daoran obtained one of the 3 exotic treasures of the Yaotai conference, the cold ghost gall. Although he had not completely refined the cold ghost gall, he had a keen sense of the netherworld's items and knew the power of the yellow spring water. Zhong Daoran was only a late Yuanying stage cultivator. Even if he reached out of body or Fenshin stage, his physical body, no, his Yuanying spirit body could not touch a trace of the yellow spring water. The yellow spring water was death qi, and the Yuanying was a spirit body. Zhong Daoran could use a secret technique to refine the cold ghost gall with his spirit body, but he definitely did not dare to refine the yellow spring water. Run. Zhong Daoran had the same feeling as Zun Kong Shengren. A way out appeared in his heart. Moreover, Zhong Daoran was very confident that although the water of the yellow springs had begun to overflow, with his nascent soul and the refined ghost guts, he would definitely be able to escape unscathed from the yellow spring. Run! It was just a thought, but Zhong Daoran immediately killed it. After he escaped, the Misty Mountain maze would lose its balance and the entire formation would kill everyone on the spot. Moreover, once he left, the Yellow Spring Heaven formation would crazily counterattack Zhai Xingzi. Zhai Xingzi would definitely not be able to resist it. Other than death, there would be no other ending for Zhai Xingzi. Zhong Daoran might not have Xiao Hua's heaven-defying luck, but the mercy in his heart was not much less than Xiao Hua's, or even more. Since he did not intend to escape, Zhong Daoran immediately made a decision. 13. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.